Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the Algarve Classic Festival 2024, live from the Autódromo Internacional Algarve, Portimao in Portugal. What a glorious Sunday morning it is as we get ourselves ready for this fantastic 2-hour race in the GT and SPORTSCAR Cup for pre-1966 cars. It's going to be a really exciting battle across the 32 cars and 63 drivers. It should normally be 64, but there is one car that will only have one competitor in the grid for the 2-hour race that will be doing the entirety of the race itself. As you can see, the minute board is going up, so the cars are already in position, ready to go racing. It's a very exciting time and very different to the conditions that we had last year. It was a torrential downpour in the 2023 race that had several stoppages, several safety car periods that meant there was very little on-track racing. This year, it couldn't be more different, and great to see this plethora of cars across the GT2, GT3, GT4, TC1 and Sport 1 categories. It really is going to be a fantastic race battle across the 2 hours. I'm Jake Sanson, great to be with you for the entirety of this magnificent GT and Sports Car Cup race. The safety car is leading the field around, and we're going on tour with these magnificent machines from between 1953 and 1966. We'll talk you through them all over the course of the 2 hours, as well as introduce you to the drivers that are behind the wheel. There are some magnificent racing cars out here from all various different manufacturers, from Lotus to Jaguar to Porsche to AC to Austin Healey to Morgan to Triumph to MG to TVR to Alfa Romeo. It is an absolutely fantastic plethora of race cars, and we are very excited to tell you all about them. Pole position is Reyes Salter and Andy Newell, who got a time of 2 minutes 40 dead yesterday, to the thousandth of a second. Reyes Salter will start the race in her Jaguar E-Type. Andy Newell will take over later in the day. Second on the grid, it's Messrs Martin Melling and Jason Minshaw in their low-drag version of the same Jaguar E-Type. Third on the grid, it's Montgomery and Welsh. That's Bruce Montgomery and Jeremy Welsh in the 1961 Austin Healey 3000 that leads the GT3 category. Fourth on the starting grid, it is the combination of John Cornwell and Kieran Clark in their Austin Healey 3000. That's the 1964 version. That is going to be running from fourth position on the starting grid, car number 119. Fifth on the starting grid, it's very popular Doug Muirhead and Jeremy Welch in their Austin Healey. They have the 106 model, which is the predecessor to the Austin Healey 3000. They're starting fifth on the grid. It's going to be a start of the race for Simon Orobi-Gann alongside James Bellinger in their 1960 Morgan Plus 4 SS. That's in the GT3 category. There is another Morgan Plus 4 SS. That's in the GT2 category. We'll talk about that. Then it's the Charleses, father and son. It's going to be great to see Chris Charles Sr. and Chris Charles Jr. behind the wheel of the number one AC Cobra. All three of the AC Cobras in this race are the 289 Sports Package models from 1965, and it is Chris Charles Jr. that will start the race. So son will hand over to father later on in the bid. Eighth on the starting grid, it's going to be Matt Walton and Nigel Greensall in their 1962 Jaguar E-Type number 7. Ninth on the grid, it is the only Portuguese team in the entire race, Pedro Marcelo Silva and Jose Monroy in their AC Cobra 289. And then rounding up the top 10, it is the combination of Rob Newell and Oliver Marseille in their Jaguar XK120, the car, of course, that became a Le Mans 24-hour winner on 2 separate occasions. So we're going to see a really exciting battle as the 32 cars get themselves up to speed. There is the number 52, Reyes Salter. She is behind the wheel of the very bright green Jaguar E-Type. We've got lots of good battles through the different classes. Let's give you a bit of a shout out for a couple of the other classes to watch out for. Keep an eye in the TC1 category. Ellie Birchenhow in her Austin Mini Cooper S that she's sharing with Nick Topless, who is on double duty today, sharing the MGB number 332 with James Topless. So he's the only driver racing 2 cars today. But pole position in the GT2 category is George Grant from Clapham North MOT, and of course the BRSCC Supersport Endurance Cup race winner, alongside Nick Rutter, the man who keeps saying, I'm going to retire from motorsport this year. Yeah, right. As soon as you get a decent race car, Nick, you're going to be right behind the wheel of a race car again. And Rob Boston Racing, of course, preparing that car for action last year on their debut in the wet weather conditions, and they very nearly won the class. So they're definitely ones to watch out for this year. So the drivers come out of the final turn. They're going to come up over the top of the crest of the rise, and for 2 hours we will be racing to the proper soundtrack of authentic vintage motorsport. These GT and sports cars from pre-1966. The thunder, the power and the glory once again returns to the Autódromo Internacional, and it is racing underway for 2 hours of the GT and SPORTSCAR Cup GT. Let's race at Portimao. The cavalry charges to turn one, no problem at all as they all get underway, but Reyes Salta's not got the best start. That Jaguar E-Type is down to third position. It's the hard-charging third position car, I think, that's come through. That's the Austin Healey 3000 into turn one, but a little bit of a lock-up, so there could be a bit of a debate through the first couple of corners. It is the E-Type that's back in front, but it's not Reyes Salta's car. That looks to me like it's Melling that's got in front. So a good start. Well, it's actually Jason Minshaw who's behind the wheel, of course, the son of the late, great Alan Minshaw. So Alan Minshaw, who sadly passed away in the spring of this year. And it's great that his sons continue the story for the great man, of course, the founder of Demon Twigs. Look at that, that's one of the Cobras, I think, going slightly sideways up at the sharp end of the field. As Reyes Salta just taking her time about things in the opening lap. It's a 2-hour race, so you've got plenty of time to make a good charge of things as the field work their way through on the opening tour. So the cars making their way around this very tight and twisty circuit, but a lot of good opportunities for the cars to really max out their power. And we'll talk about many of them, of course, through the entirety of this 2 hours race. But out in front, already some big chargers. Reyes Salta not getting the start from pole position she would have wanted, but very much a driver of good experience nonetheless. She has been racing for 15 complete seasons in historic racing, made her debut back in 2010. Of course, we're at the end of the 2024 campaign, so has been racing these cars for quite a long time now. Plenty of experience, being chased down at the moment by Doug Muirhead in the Austin Healey 106. Trying to make the move up the inside. Is that Muirhead going through? Yes, it is. So Muirhead gets through into, trying to do the math here, that's going to be 7th position, I think, for Doug Muirhead. In fact, it is 8th, because they've got a car just in front of them. But sliding their way through in the lead of the race, it is the 55, currently being driven by Jason Minshaw, the Jaguar E-Type low drag, out in front at the moment as they complete the first lap. It is Minshaw that leads the way. Up into 2nd position, the fast-starting AC Cobra of Chris Charles Jr. up into 2nd position then. And then it is Cordwell who runs in 3rd position. That is John Cordwell in the Austin Healey 3000. So we've got 3 very good challenges up at the sharp end of the field. My apologies, no, that's the 72. That's Brian Cordwell and Kieran Clark. Kieran Clark is also on double duty today. So it's the AC Cobra that is going well. So it's Kieran Clark at the wheel. John Cordwell is driving the Austin Healey 3000. And in 4th position, it's the Portuguese pair, Pedro Macedo Silva in his AC Cobra 289. The number 195, the red car, you can see it in the background. They're in convertible mode, and they find themselves in 4th position at the moment. Big pressure from Kieran Clark as he tries to take on Chris Charles Jr. up the hill. They go through the hairpin, up over the left-hand sweeper, up over the top of the crest, and already a very good start for Jason Minshaw. So Jason Minshaw looking very calm and composed in the lead of the race. Good pressure though from Pedro Macedo Silva. Don't forget, they're the only Portuguese team in this race. Pretty much every other crew, with a few exceptions, are a British run team. There are a few other teams in the mix that have got other drivers. Of course, Florian and Julius Brandt are in their TVR Grand Tourer, the first ever TVR built in Blackpool. Only 796 of those cars were ever built, and it's great to see they've still got a lease of life in this category. Currently in 24th position, just in behind McEwen and Gray in the MGB, and they, of course, are fighting for the GT2 victory. It's currently Christian Oldendorf who leads in GT2 in his Julia TZ2. That's the race-going version of the TZ. Only 12 of those cars were ever built. So this is quite a rarity that we're seeing from Christian Oldendorf. Top 4 cars are getting well clear though. 2nd position at the moment in the GT2 category is George Grant, getting a very good start in the MGB number 69. Still running very well, but at the sharp end of the field, we're watching Kieran Clark really leading into the AC Cobra 289 as they go up over the top of the crest. The similar car chasing them down. And it's so much nicer to see these cars at full chat after last year when they were on tippy toes behind the safety car several times through the 2 hours. Now they're on bone dry conditions here at Portimao. Great to see what these cars can actually do. And look, Pedro Macedo Silva already putting Kieran Clark under some pressure. Tucking out through the right-hander sweepers. Now heavy on the brakes. These cars are obviously born to four-wheel drift. And we've got Jaguar, then 3 Cobras, the Austin Healey 3000 of Bruce Montgomery, B5 at the moment. Then it is Walton, who's in 6th position. That's Matt Walton, sharing his car with the legend Nigel Greensall. Is that going to be a challenge for the lead there? I think Childs is trying to go for it. Chris Childs trying to get the lead there from Jason Minshaw. Has definitely had a very solid lap 3 so far. And it's looking very positive indeed for him as he tries to go for it. But it looks as though it's going to be Macedo Silva that gets an overtaking move before that. Kieran Clark trying to hold on to 3rd position. Is it going to be a red Cobra through first? Yes, it is. So Pedro Macedo Silva gets in front of Kieran Clark. And these 4 cars are obviously all battling for the GT4 victory and the win outright. Leaders in GT3, it's Bruce Montgomery and Jeremy Welsh in the Austin Healey 3000. Montgomery behind the wheel. Then we've got Matt Walton in front of Doug Muirhead. And then next up, it is Mark Pangborn, known to his mates as Pangio, of course, in 8th position. Austin Healey 3000 running in 4th position. Then it's the SP1 category leader. That is currently Rudi Friedrichs, the German driver, sharing that car with Charlie Martin. Side by side, though, this is going to get very close for the battle as Jason Minshaw is trying to defend here from Chris Charles. Chris Charles Jr. coming round the outside to try and make the overtaking move. That's what these cars were born to do. And it's Jaguar versus Cobra. It's going to be a great run on the inside line from Chris Charles Jr. Surely he'll sweep through. He does indeed. Four-wheel drifting, takes the lead through the hairpin. Absolutely brilliant from Chris Charles Jr. He hits the front, but he drifts out wide as they come up over the top of the crest. And it's AC Cobra versus Jaguar E-Type low drag down the straight. Jason Minshaw's got the throttle wide open as he tries to get back on terms with Chris Charles, but he decides to hang in behind. Plenty of time still to go in this race. Great racing. Proper four-wheel drift through the first couple of corners. And for the moment at least, Chris Charles Jr. has brought the AC Cobra into the lead front of that E-Type Jag. This is the low drag version. Jason Minshaw, such a fantastic member of the motor racing community, obsessed with his Super Tourers. Of course, his father Alan raced in the British Touring Car Championship in period just at the beginning of the Super Touring era, and it's not uncommon to see Jason Minshaw playing around with Volvo 850s and S40s in the Super Touring paddock. But great to see him here behind the wheel of the Jaguar E-Type low drag. Now let's have a look further down the field. We talked about the SP1 leader. That, of course, is Rudi Friedrichs, sharing the Jaguar C-Type from 1953, the oldest car in the race, sharing that car with Charlie Martin. And the leaders in GT2, well, a leader, I should say, is still Christian Oldendorf. There's a double yellow flag at turn 1, so something's gone wrong there. Looks like Minshaw's now under pressure from Macedo Silva. But there is a double yellow flag at turn 1 and turn 2, and it goes full course yellow, and that's why. That's very unfortunate. That's the 28, that's Oliver Marseille in the Jaguar XK120 having come to a stop. So Oliver Marseille unfortunately retiring from the race there. A man who has had plenty of success in the past. He drove a 1975 Alpine in the Monterey Grand Classic a few years ago, I do believe. That's certainly not going well for him at the moment, and it's full course yellows around the course now, so it's effectively safety car but without the actual presence of the safety car. There you see full course yellows around the course, and that is to try and rescue the stricken Jaguar XK120, the only XK120 in the race. That's the car that obviously had great success in rallying and GTs. It won the first ever 24-hour race in Australia, and ironically enough, it is the 1954 version of that car that Oliver Marseille was sharing with Rob Newell. Don't think they're going to make it to the finish in this one, though. Rather sadly, of course, for that Jaguar XK120. That's, of course, the first imported car ever to win in NASCAR, would you believe? Yes, strangely enough, a Jaguar won a race in NASCAR back in 1954. The first ever imported car to win in NASCAR in America. But certainly no wins for a Jaguar XK120 today in Portimao. The sole XK120 in the race, sadly out of it. Still under full course yellows as the marshals are trying to remove that stricken car Very wise from the officials, though, to go full course yellow rather than to go to safety car. But look at the threatening red Cobra of Pedro Macedo Silva going up against the black machines of Chris Charles Jr. in his Cobra 289. And then, of course, you've got Jason Minshaw in his E-Type low drag. And at the back of that little queue, the man that Macedo Silva's just overtaken, Kieran Clark, in his Cobra 289. But Pedro Macedo Silva would clearly want to be the winner of this race as the only Portuguese crew. He would love to take the win on home soil. Let's not forget, he's very much an experienced hand at vintage racing himself. They raced at Spa last month, Macedo Silva and Monroy. Had plenty of experience in the Goodwood Revival and the members meeting as well in the past, so they do know how to prepare a great race car in international competition. And great to see that they are challenging the might of the British boys in the top three. So we're just waiting for the full course yellow to be removed. We've also not had the chance yet to talk about the TC1 category. Well, that is currently being led by Turner and Galliford. So Rick Turner behind the wheel of his number 102 1960 Austin Mini Cooper S. It's all minis in that particular category, the TC1, but only one of them is not an Austin Mini Cooper S, and that is the Broadspeed car shared by father and daughter Richard and Alice Locke. And it's Alice Locke who's behind the wheel at the moment. They are currently in 30th position, just in behind the toplesses. James is the one who's at the wheel at the moment, and of course he's got to be, because Nick Topless is currently behind the wheel of the Austin Mini Cooper S that he shares with Ellie Birchinoff. Here we go, we're back to green flag conditions, green, 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 here at Algarve. And as they come round the final turn at Portimao, it's going to be a really exciting charge forward from Pedro Macedo Silva. He's got up to speed quickly, and he's going to be putting a lot of pressure on Minshaw as they come off the turn. So Chris Charles Jr. leads the way in the AC Cobra 289 number 1. Then behind it's Jason Minshaw in the 55 Jaguar E-Type low drive. That's the 1961 car. It's number 55. And then the 195 car, Pedro Macedo Silva in his 65 AC Cobra through turn 1. Has he got a better run off the turn than Minshaw? It looks like he has, but Minshaw's going to protect the inside line. So for Pedro Macedo Silva, he's got to be very calculated about where he goes for the overtake. He goes long, wide out of the hairpin, can't get on the throttle fast enough to make it work, and he's actually had to bail off the throttle. That's going to be good news for Kieran Clark. So Kieran Clark has got an opportunity over the top of the crest, and he is going to go side by side. Will he make the move into the hairpin to put the Portuguese man back down to 4th position? He's waved through. He doesn't want to damage his beautiful Cobra. He wants to let him go and then try and take him on again. Look at the squirt on the throttle for Pedro Macedo Silva as he gets back on the inside line and retakes the position. Loses a place to gain it back again. Excellent racing. That's what these cars are so good at. Now in the SP1 category, we've got a fascinating battle going on at the moment for the SP1 victory. Obviously, Dino Friedrichs is the Rudy Friedrichs, sorry, is the man who leads the way with Charlie Martin in the Jaguar C-Type 1953 car. And then there's a good battle going on for 2nd place between Max Smith-Hilliard and Dean Baker. And they are currently 2nd and 3rd in their Lotus 10 and HWM Jaguars, respectfully. Hopefully we'll be able to pick that battle up a little bit later on. But two very worthy race winners in the past. Max Smith-Hilliard, of course, won at the Monaco Historique this year, running in 2nd place in SP1. And Dean Baker was last year's SCCC TCR champion, so plenty of great racers in this field. Pedro Macedo Silva starting to put Jason Minshaw under pressure again now that they're back to green flag conditions. He really is in the zone in this AC Cobra. Look at the 4-wheel drift coming over the crest as they go through the hairpin and back onto the home stretch again. Excellent stuff. As Chris Charles Jr. leads the way from Jason Minshaw, Pedro Macedo Silva, and in 4th it's Kieran Clark in the AC Cobra 289. So excellent racing at the moment. Still, they battle away. Only 2 drivers today on double duty. Nick Topless, who's not only racing the Austin Mini Cooper S that he's currently sharing with Ellie Birchinoff, but he will also get into the MGB that he shares with James Topless. And the man you're looking at in 4th position, Kieran Clark, is also going to be leaping behind the wheel of the Austin Healey 3000 that he shares with John Cordwell. He's obviously sharing this car with Brian Cordwell. Up the inside line. Is it going to be the move though from Kieran Clark, the ex-Formula Renault driver? Up the inside line, gets the move there on Pedro Macedo Silva. No worries at all there to get ahead, and this time Portuguese driver is not going to have a response to Kieran Clark. Up over the top of the crest again as they go through to the right-handers, and Kieran Clark looks like he's going to take on Jason Minshaw straight away. Love watching these guys at speed. Excellent work so far. Really tight race. This could be a chance for Kieran Clark. He's going to have to bail off a little bit here as they come over the top of the hill. This is a race full of uphill and down dale. A circuit that really stretches these cars as to what they can do. Bit of a lock up there from Clark, but certainly looking very strong at the moment as they run in very close proximity. Really good racing so far. Bernardo Colby obviously cheering on Macedo Silva. So we're going to see some really exciting race battles from all of the contenders. 32 cars all the way down the field. Let's try and work you through as we watch the top four, but a little bit of a run wide there from Minshaw. Is that going to be enough of an invitation for Kieran Clark? He's not quite able to get the move there. Meanwhile, behind this, we've got Matt Walton in 5th position in his Jaguar E-Type, leading in GT3, and Rudy Friedrichs is in 6th position in the Jaguar C-Type, leading the SP1 category. Then in 7th place at the moment, it is Robert Cole in his Lotus Elan 26R. That's the racing version of the Lotus Elan, in 7th position. In 5th place in GT4. And then we've got Doug Muirhead in front of Pangio himself. Mark Pangborn currently running in 9th place. And in 10th position is the other Lotus Elan. That's the car currently being driven by Joel Hopwood. In 11th position, we've got John Caldwell, who's in the Austin Healey 3000. That's the man who will be replaced by this man later on in the race, Kieran Clark, who's going to be racing 2 separate cars. 12th position is Rhea Salter, having started from pole position. She's now in 12th position in her Jaguar E-Type. Still plenty of time to go, of course. And then we've got David Smithies in his Austin Healey 3000, running in 13th place, just in front of, I think that's Michael Russell, the motorcycle racer turned classic historic driver. So Michael Russell, 14th position. Then it's Christian Oldendorf on his own in the Alfa Romeo Giulia TZ2. So he's going to have an extra long pit stop to equalise the fact that he's not going to have a driver change. And then the Lotus 10 and the HWM Jaguar that are battling away for the 2nd spot on the podium in SP1. That's the combination of Max Smith-Hilliard versus Dean Baker, the British driver versus the Canadian. And then we've got, just behind them, the combination of Alan and Daniel Ross-Jones. It's Alan Ross-Jones who's behind the wheel at the moment, father ahead of son. And then behind them we've got the fantastic, oh no, it looks like Alan Ross-Jones has actually got ahead now of Dean Baker, who is sharing that HWM Jaguar with Gregor Fiskin, who is one of the only drivers in Le Mans history to have raced in 4 consecutive, well, I think he might be the only driver in history to have raced in 4 consecutive Le Mans 24 hours in 4 completely different classes. Certainly in the modern era, he's one of the only drivers ever to have raced at the Le Mans 24 hours in 4 different classes. LMP1, LMP2, GT1 and GT2. So he's done all 4 classes, which is quite an incredible achievement for Gregor Fiskin. He's watching along there as co-driver with Dean Baker. Behind them, it is Simon Arabi-Gann, who is sharing the Morgan Plus 4 SS with James Bellinger. And as you can see, they're starting to go through traffic now. They're just lapping the Porsche. That is Steve Monk behind the wheel, sharing that car with Peter Tognola. And they're also lapping one of the MGs. I think that actually is topless. So it looks like there's been a pit stop for Bruce Montgomery. The Austin Healey 3000 has been into the pits. I'm not entirely sure why, but they've certainly had a pit stop, and that's dropped them to the back end of the field for the time being. Behind Gann and Bellinger, we've got George Grant, who is currently 2nd in the GT2 category, sharing that number 69 Rob Boston Racing Run MGB with Nick Rutter. And then we've got the Austin Mini Cooper S leading the TC1 category. That is the car currently being raced by Rick Turner, sharing that car with Bruce Galliford. As they go through the traffic, we're starting to see a little bit of a side-by-side. That's for 2nd position. Is that going to be Kieran Clark getting the move on Minshaw? No, he has to hang back again. So Minshaw holds on to it for the time being. Kieran Clark swarming around all over the back though, and that could be a good run off the turn. Kieran Clark is going to try and make the move on the inside in the Cobra, and he gets ahead. So Kieran Clark into second place then, gets the run on Jason Minshaw, and that's only an invitation for Pedro Macedo Silva to close up on them. So excellent work so far. And I do believe Christian Oldendorf is making his way into the pits in the lead of the GT2 category. Certainly he hasn't come through yet at the end of the lap. So Christian Oldendorf, I think, has actually made a mistake somewhere and lost some ground. Certainly the battle's going really strong up at the sharp end of the field, but as we know now, it's AC Cobra chasing AC Cobra, as Kieran Clark has managed to get him to some of the second place, and if Pedro Macedo Silva can get ahead of Jason Minshaw, then it's going to be AC Cobras all the way. The car obviously made famous by Shelby American, Carroll Shelby, who helped to develop that car with Ken Miles in the early 60s. Of course, the cars were built by AC in the United Kingdom at Thames Dutton in Surrey. Fabulous race cars, those, and of course there are 3 of them in this race, and all 3 of them are looking to be 1, 2 and 3 in this race. It's all up to Jason Minshaw to try and keep the low drag Jaguar E-Type in front, but he's run wide, and that's going to be perfect invitation for Pedro Macedo Silva. He's going to get ahead. So it is AC Cobras 1, 2 and 3 as the leaders lap their way past the number 74. That is Sandy McEwen, who normally shares his car with well, Sandy McEwen is quite usually sharing his car with Ross McEwen, but it's Stephen Gray who is racing that MGB with him today. So the leading cars go through past the MGB of Sandy McEwen as they continue on their way through. I was going to pick up the pieces after the TC1 leader, Rick Turner, and behind them it is Julius Brandt, who is sharing his TVR Grand Tourer Mark III with Florian Brandt. That's actually the rarest of the TVR Grand Tourers, but ironically enough, one of the most suitable for classic racing, and it's one of the rarest cars in British motorsport as well, because they only actually built 796 TVR Grand Tourers. If you compare that, for example, with the Morgan Plus 4 SS, the first iteration of the Morgan Plus 4, over 4,500 of those were built. So quite a rare car, the TVR Grand Tourer, but still a plucky little race car for this kind of activity. Now, who is that there lapping at the moment? It's another one of the MGBs. As Pedro Macedo Silva works his way past Hugh Lafferty. That is Hugh Lafferty who's sharing that car with Ian Bankhurst. This is Hugh Lafferty's 2nd year of racing that particular MGB. Really enjoying his life in vintage motorsport. Certainly doing a grand job of things at the moment. Looking really good for the time being. Bit of a shout out needs to go to the Morgan Plus 4 SS driver Simon King, as shouted out by both Ryan and Grace, who are watching along, and very much going strong. Simon King having a good race of it at the moment. He is actually the man behind McEwen at the moment. They are in 6th position currently, and then we have Alice Locke in her Mini Broadspeed. We're up in amongst the minis at the moment as we watch the race leader, Chris Charles Jr., trying to work his way through the traffic, and he's got to be careful how he times it. They're also lapping the number 32. That is Julius Brandt in the TVR Grand Tourer. There's Pedro Macedo Silva. All about timing, getting through the traffic. And of course, the onus is not on the cars being lapped to get out of the way. It's the leaders that have to do the hard work. As into the pits comes Christian Oldendorf. So that is the Alfa Romeo Giulia TZ2. The rarest car in this grid, it has to be said. There were only 12 TZ2s ever built. So this is quite a special car. As Christian Oldendorf gets out of the car, but of course he's going to get back in it again because he's racing that car on his own. So he's just getting out of the car, having a bit of a breather, and he'll be getting back behind the wheel again. Expect 2 stints per driver. Half an hour, then half an hour, then half an hour, half an hour. It's not an exact science, but it's roughly what you're going to get from the racers over the course of this 2-hour race. Should be about 3 pit stops per team. Certainly for the time being, it's AC Cobras all the way. Big slide from Chris Charles Jr., trying his best to stay in front of Kieran Clark, as Pedro Macedo Silva just tries to stay there in 3rd position and try and get as close to the 2 cars in front as he can. They're currently working their way through the traffic. George Grant, the new leader in GT2, after Christian Oldendorf's pit stop, of course. So George Grant leading in George Grant leading in the GT2 category, just lets the AC Cobras go through. And of course, this is their second appearance at the Algarve Classic. They debuted last year. It was actually Rob Boston who shared the car with George Grant last season in the torrential downpour. But this year, it's Nick Rutter, the former Masters champion in the BRSCC Mazda MX-5 Super Cup, who shares the car with George Grant on this occasion. Very good friends and great teammates in this particular race because they're currently leading in GT2. There goes Chris Charles Jr. in the AC Cobra 289, having a really good run of it. So far, Kieran Clark second, third place for Pedro Macedo Silva. Very good race going on at the moment between these four cars. The fourth of those, of course, being Jason Minshaw in the low drag E-Type. Still, the battle's raging all the way through. Now, the car in front of us, that looks to me to be the... trying to figure out which car that is, but Christian Oldendorf is still the only car in pit lane, just trying to see if anybody else has elected to come in this early. Well, obviously, we have the Jaguar XK120 that pulled off the course earlier on is the only one showing us in pit. That was the car being driven by Oliver Marseille. So as the field works its way through the traffic, that is the 71 just up the road that they're working their way through. That's Alan Ross Jones in the Triumph TR4. Beautiful car that had SCCA success in North America throughout its life. In fact, its last ever class title was back in 1991, would you believe? It shows you how successful a car the Triumph TR4 was. So Chris Charles Jr. still leading. Big slide from Kieran Clark as he tries to close in on his rival. Magnificent battle up the front, but it's great to see them now working their way through the traffic as we get to see a few more of the battles out on the course as well. There is Jason Minshaw still trying to push that Jaguar E-Type back into a podium position, but it's very clear that here at Portimao in the 2024 Algarve Classic, the car to have is an AC Cobra, and all three of those Cobras are the 289 Sports one from 1965. Brilliant race cars. Great to see that everybody in the field is pushing them very hard indeed. Chris Charles Jr. over the top of the crest from Kieran Clark, and then Pedro Macedo Silva. Now that is the oldest car in the race. A beautiful machine. Rudi Friedrichs, the German talent behind the wheel, in the Jaguar C-Type from 1953. That is a gorgeous race car, and of course, it won the Le Mans 24 Hours in 1951 and 53. In fact, this car is a very important one for motorsport because it was the first car ever to win the Le Mans 24 Hours at an average speed greater than 100 miles an hour. It's a very special racing car indeed, this one. It's the oldest car in the race. It's currently being driven by Rudi Friedrichs, the German talent, sharing the car with the British driver Charlie Martin. So through they go, up over the top of the crest, down the right-hander, down the drop. They call this circuit the roller coaster, and with very good reason. Really is pushing these cars to the limits of what they are capable of. Great to see. Oh, it's a nice dive up the inside of the Porsche of Monk. So Monk lost out there, I think, to one of the Lotus Elans. I think that was the Lotus Elan actually putting a lap on them. So now up the inside of Monk also goes the Jaguar. I think that might even be for position, is that? Let's try and get through. Just trying to, no, Friedrichs is in 5th position overall, so that is to put another lap on the Porsche. So this is the car that's climbed its way all the way to 5th position and is, of course, leading in the SP1 category. As into the pits comes Steve Monk in the Porsche 911, and that's in pit road for the number 129. That is Richard Parsons. So Richard Parsons, who is sharing the car with Alistair Pugh. Where were they running prior to the pit stop? Well, they were in about 25th position, so they were second in TC1. The leader of that category, of course, is Rick Turner, sharing his 1960 Austin Mini Cooper S with Bruce Galliford. I could wax lyrical about the Austin Mini Cooper S, but you've heard it all before. The only thing that I will say about the Austin Mini Cooper S on this occasion is we've got 3 different years of car, a 1960, a 1963 and a 1965, and of course this is the car we're talking about. The Austin Mini Cooper S won the Monte Carlo Rally in 64, 65 and 67. Should have won the 66 as well, of course, but that's a story for another time. And of course, the legendary Hollywood actor Steve McQueen not only owned one, but also raced one in period. and Enzo Ferrari had 3 of them. Very special car, that. Wonderful to see this gorgeous Jaguar C-Type. It's just wonderful to see it racing as it was meant to be raced. There's always this school of thought, well, these beautiful cars should be kept in a museum. Other people say, no, they're racing cars, they should be raced. And it is beautiful to see Rudy Friedrichs really leaning into it as he charges his way up the hill again. He'll go down the drop through the right-hander. The oldest car in the field, currently running in P5, leading the SP1 category. A full 8 places ahead of Max Smith-Hilliard in his Lotus 10. It is currently in second position. The Lotus Mark 10. Only 6 or 7 of those cars were ever made. It's not really yet clear as to how many. We haven't seen it on screen yet, sadly, but that's the car that's obviously famous for not only being the first time ever that a Lotus had full disc brakes as standard, but also the car driven by Peter Scott Russell, the man who coined the phrase Silverstone, the home of British motor racing, when he was a trackside commentator. So a little bit of history there for you. I mean, it is historic motor racing after all. That's kind of what you sign up for. Big slide from Jason Minshaw. Still trying to get well clear of the man in 5th position, Rudy Friedrichs. Although I say 5th position, but now it doesn't look like he is anymore, because Rudy Friedrichs apparently has been overtaken by the Lotus Elan. So the Lotus Elan has come through and made the overtake. That is Robert Cole. So we're going to need to have a look back. Now, this is interesting. This is the AC Cobra lapping Reyes Salta, that initially got that car in qualifying in pole position. Don't forget, it was fairly wet conditions yesterday for pole. So it's a very different set of circumstances that we go racing in today. Now, interestingly, Christian Oldendorf is still in the pit lane, so the ipso facto race leaders now in GT2 are George Grant and Nick Rutter. George Grant, of course, the man who is the current owner and manager at Clapham North MOT, the garages founded by the brilliant Ronnie Grant, who in his racing days used to race in Formula 3 against the late great Ayrton Senna. So some great battles out on the course everywhere you look. Over the top of the crest, down to the braking zone. Chris Charles Jr. desperately trying not to trip over the car I was talking about a little while ago. That's Max Smith-Hilliard behind the wheel of the Lotus Mark 10. Look at it. Beautiful machine, very lightweight, very nimble. Crystal engine to that car, I do believe. Oh, talk about threading the eye of the needle. Goodness me. Diving up the inside to go right up the middle. And the Mini caught completely by surprise in the middle of all that as well. Goodness me, that was a heart-stopping moment as we keep an eye on Max Smith-Hilliard in the Lotus Mark 10. And waving aside the leaders as well. I think Max Smith-Hilliard's got the message. Okay, these Cobras are all over me, so I may as well just wave them aside and let them all go. A very scary moment there. I think that might have been Rick Turner's Mini that we were watching in the middle of all that as well. As Chris Charles Jr. in the AC Cobra is coming up to put a lap on Mark Pangborn. Pangio gets well out of the way, no problems there, and that is the Morgan in the pits. That is Simon Orobigan handing over to James Bellinger. So James Bellinger gets behind the wheel. Great combination, those two. Bellinger is, of course, a regular at the Goodwood members meeting. Was there at the beginning of the year, of course, as well. Great to see so many of these drivers putting on a good show. I love watching that car tank slap its way through the final hairpin. It's just joyous. So down the straight, Chris Charles Jr. AC Cobra with so much pace. Such an incredible car. Still fast even today. Wonderful to watch it at full chat as Chris Charles Jr. goes up the inside. Oh, a very leery MGB there. Goodness me, that was a scary moment. Almost into the door of the race leaders. That could have been a very expensive moment for both men. Into the pits comes Doug Muirhead. He'll hand the car over to Jeremy Welch. So out goes the Austin Healey 106. That was the second of the big Healeys, as they were known in period, of course. The car that then succeeded it was the Austin Healey 3000. We've got a whopping 5 of those cars in this race, of course. Great to see a Morgan +4 SS out there as well. In fact, we've got 2 of them in the race. One of them's in the GT2 category. The other one of them is in the GT3 category. I think that is James Bellinger now behind the wheel again. A apologies if I name the wrong driver in the car at any one time. It's never easy to know who's who without having a digital readout, and we don't have that technology at the moment. I'll just tell you who is starting the race, and after each pit stop I will guess that they've changed driver each time, and you'll have to bear with me on that one. As Marcus Moreira points out, magnificent. It really is indeed. Hope you're enjoying watching along on the live stream as much as I am talking about it. Into the pits comes Oliver Marseille, handing the car over to Rob Newell. Now, of course, they recovered that car, having it broke down earlier on, but they recovered it back to the pits, and so they can keep racing. So they were at the back of the field, of course, as the leaders just worked their way past James Topless in his MGB. And up the inside, that's a lovely move there from the leader, Chris Charles Jr., to get up the Lotus Elan and get through on the inside line. I think that's Joel Hopwood's car, the number 19. That's the difference between the two cars. We've got two 1964 Lotus Elans. My apologies, no, we've got a 64 Elan, and then we've got a 65 Elan 26R. That's the racing version of the Elan. But great to see everybody really leaning on it and having a great time out there. Excellent displays and a great work had by all on the inside line. That's going to be a nice move from Kieran Clark to get up the inside line. I'm fairly sure that is Hopwood's Elan. Real snaking under braking in these cars. It's not easy to get these cars slowed down. There's Jason Minshaw. That just shows you how tricky it is to follow the Cobras out in front. He's lost a lot of ground of late. So Jason Minshaw just keeping the Jaguar on the straight and narrow. That's the big thing at the moment. So great to see all of the contenders as they run in close proximity. There is the number 72. That is the man, Kieran Clark, who's been doing it. What's behind you doesn't matter on the overalls there down in pit lane. Loving the style of these drivers as they wait to get behind the wheel again. Gotta love this particular club, the GT and Sports Car Cup. Do a fantastic job and great organising over the course of the season. They've had a very busy calendar of great races through the year. Races at Enna, Pergusa in Sicily. They had a race at Silverstone earlier in the year, and of course we also had great activity and a great run from the last time out at Castle Combe. Great work that Flavien and Vanessa Marseille put on to organise these incredible events. Of course, they'll have a wonderful night in the end of season awards dinner at Pall Mall, the Royal Automobile Club in London. It's a nice little battle going on. That's Matt Walton just getting his way up the inside of, I think Steve Monk is still behind the wheel of that car as best as my knowledge. If it's not him, then it's Peter Tognola, who's had over a decade of experience racing that Porsche. So great to see him continuing his journey. A little bit of a check at the right rear quarter there of the number 61 Austin Healey 106. That's Muirhead and Welch. Now that's a second appearance in the pits for them. So I'm afraid all is not well in the number 61 car. Jeremy Welch gets out of the car again. So difficulties there, as there's obviously more to that car wrong than meets the eye. There is Pedro Macedo Silva, the Portuguese driver, doing his best to keep himself right in the hunt. Looks like they're going long on the strategy on this one, trying their best to keep the car moving forward. Big slide from the Jaguar that's in front. Don't tell me that's Pedro Macedo Silva losing ground again down to third position, is it? That really would have cost them a lot of time. No, they're just putting a lap on the Jaguar. So Pedro Macedo Silva in the AC Cobra still doing a fair job in third place. Has actually made a lot of ground here on Chris Charles Jr. and Kieran Clark. So he needs to keep his wits about him. He may get an opportunity to pop up into second position before too long, as the GT4 leaders continue to work their way through the traffic. Great racing. What a circuit to do this on as well. The Autódromo Internacional Algarve, the real roller coaster of a race circuit. Everybody just trying to stay away from Chris Charles Jr. and Kieran Clark, who are just cannoning their way through this field. But Kieran Clark's made a big gain here. Look at that. Gets very close under braking. You want to be very careful just how much aggression you use on the brakes going into these slower corners, but Kieran Clark fancies his chances to take the lead here on Chris Charles Jr. He's been gaining a lot of ground in the last 5 minutes, and he runs very wide, nearly spins the car. Oh, he managed to catch that very well indeed, and Pedro Macedo Silva will have loved watching that. Excellent, he's vulnerable. I'm going to go get after him. It never stops in the GT and Sports Car Cup. Racing all the way through the field. It's great to see so many fantastic battles up and down the length and breadth of this grid. We'll give you an update shortly as to how things are in terms of the state of play of the classes, but up to 5th position now in the overall is Robert Cull in his Lotus Elan 26R. So it was indeed Joel Hopwood that we saw being lapped in his GT4 machine. As a waving there from Pedro Macedo Silva, waving into the first corner. Not entirely sure what he's gesturing towards, but clearly he's got his hands full as he runs wide in turn 1. No major disasters to report. This is a very different race compared to what we saw 12 months ago in the absolutely torrential downpour. I was in the pits for most of the race last year, and I tell you what, I couldn't feel my feet by the end of it. It was so wet. Now, we've just had a pit stop. Into the pits comes Max Smith-Hilliard. That's for 2nd place in the SP1 category, so he'll hand that over to Dean Baker, the Canadian, for the moment, in his HWM Jaguar. We haven't seen much of that car in this race, to be fair, unfortunately. Hopefully we'll get a chance to keep a look at it a little bit later on. But it's difficult when you've got such an exciting battle up front to follow everything. There are so many different cars to watch out for in this race, and we're already very close to the halfway point. This race has flown by, and it really has been fantastic entertainment. Up the inside, that's the Lotus Elan. Moving forward again, I think that is the 5th place car, Robert Cull, about to be lapped, but still running in 5th position overall. So for the moment, at least, Chris Charles Jr. still running well ahead of Kieran Clark, and then Pedro Macedo Silva. Proper four-wheel drifting as they go through the right-hander, now dropping through the left, going back up the hill again. The circuit has so many challenges. It's one of the most incredible race circuits to have been built in the 21st century. It's one of my favourites, and I'm so glad we had Formula One there a couple of years ago during the COVID-19 outbreak. Diving up the inside, getting through past Hugh Lafferty, the car that he shares with Ian Bankhurst. I'm not actually sure if it's Bankhurst or Lafferty behind the wheel, but you get the idea. As into the pits has come Rick Turner. So Rick Turner will hand the car over to Bruce Galliford. And why is that significant? Because he's the leader in TC1. And into the pits, here we go. It's a massive Cobras. They're all in together. So all 3 cars pitting at the same time. Chris Charles Jr., Kieran Clark, and Pedro Macedo Silva. They all come into the pits simultaneously. So it's going to be fascinating to see who leaves first. And this is obviously, unless Minshaw comes in at the same time, it's going to give the Jaguar driver back the lead for at least 1 lap. So in they are together, the 2 Cobras, close to each other in the pits. Just making sure that everything is tickety-boo and hunky-dory with both cars. But of course, they're in a race against each other for the victory. So nice friendly banter down in pit road, of course, but they'll be keeping an eye on each other. See how everybody's manoeuvring. So that's going to be Chris Charles Jr. out of the car. Chris Charles Sr. gets in. You'll notice the steering wheel. They actually take the steering wheel out to make the pit stop a little bit more efficient. And it's going to be Brian Cordwell who leaves the pits first. So Brian Cordwell will leave the pits well ahead of Chris Charles Sr. Faster pit stop there. So it's going to be up to Chris Charles Sr. to really push and try and close up once again. And obviously they're there for the fun and games as much as they are for the duel out on the circuit, and Chris Charles Sr. is ready to go. Now there was a bit of an investigation into the 155. Not entirely sure what it was investigated for, Christian Oldendorf, but there is no other action. So that's, I think, game over for Christian Oldendorf. So clearly there's something wrong with the car. The note that comes out on the screen is no other action. I think that's Pidgin English for the car is out of the race, so it won't be going any further. That's a real shame for Christian Oldendorf in that gorgeous Alfa Romeo Giulia TZ2, the car that won in class in the 1,000 kilometers at Monza and the Targa Florio in 65 and 66. Only 12 of those cars ever built, of course. It's a shame we won't get to see that car out again in GT2. That's good news, though, for George Grant and Nick Rutter, the Clapham North MOT-based team. run by Rob Boston Racing. They are out in first position. They almost got the podium last year. They ran out of fuel on the very last lap in last year's battle. In fact, I'm trying to remember whether it was a run out of fuel or whether there was a throttle issue. There might have been an engine misfire last year. I struggle to recall, but certainly they'll be hoping for a much smoother run to the victory this time, as we watch the new net race leaders, because of course once the pit stops are all finished off. Oh, bit of a lock up there though from Caldwell. Goodness me, Brian Caldwell, having taken over the car from Kieran Clark, finding it very tricky on this particular occasion as he gets out on the circuit again and leads the AC Cobra. What a fun car this must be to drive, as the new race leader is Jason Minshaw in the Jaguar E-Type low drag, in front of, well, the second place car is apparently the Portuguese AC Cobra. So Jose Monroy, who's managed to take over that car again, I think may have actually got out ahead. I know he hasn't. There he is. So Jose Monroy is within firing distance, certainly within spinning distance of the number 72 Cobra, but not in the lead of the race just yet. They've still got time for it though. So I do wonder about the exit line for Brian Caldwell. As Bernardo Colby has pointed out, have they crossed the pit exit line when they came out of the pits? That's an interesting possibility. That could mean an investigation. Pit stops galore. We've got Joel Hopwood in the Lotus Elan. Looks like David Smithies has brought the Austin Healey 3000 number 50 into the pits. Rhea Soter has brought her Jaguar E-Type in as well, and so too has Matt Walton come in his E-Type to hand over to Nigel Greensall, one of my favourite racing drivers of the last 30 years. There's nothing he hasn't raced at some point, including Formula One, of course. He used to race in the Euroboss category years ago for vintage Formula One cars. And Nigel Greensall, a regular in the world of Fun Cup, a regular in the world of sports cars. Great to see him still pedaling, and I don't think he's ever had an off day, has he, Nigel Greensall? So he'll be the man who gets behind the wheel of that Jaguar E-Type, which is currently battling for the GT3 podium with Pangio and Woods. So Harvey Woods, the other driver in the Austin Healey 3000. It's the best nickname in motorsport, isn't it, for Mark Pangborn, isn't it? Pangio. Gotta love that. Right, there is a drive-through penalty that's been handed out, and that's for speeding in the pit lane. That is for Rick Turner and Bruce Galliford. That's disastrous for them in TC1. They were the leaders in TC1 prior to the pit stops. So I would suspect then that that is going to hand the lead of TC1 permanently to Ellie Birchenhoff and then Nick Topless. It's actually listed that there are 3 drivers in that car, so does that mean that James Topless is going to be behind the wheel of that car at some point as well? Certainly suggests that it could be the case. We've got the Mini in front of them, the race leaders now, as into the pits comes the Jaguar. That's Matt Walton, we just mentioned, handing the car over to Nigel Greensall. There it goes again, back into the race. Up the inside of the Mini. What a frightening moment. Ay, ay, ay. That is one heck of a corner to make the overtake on in a 4-wheel drifting Cobra. Would have loved to have seen the onboard camera there on board the Mini, watching that car. And there is Jason Minshaw handing the Jaguar over to Martin Melling. So Jason Minshaw will give that car over to Martin Melling. Whether he's doing it on this stint or the next one, but that's certainly who he's sharing the car with anyway, as the main set picture watches Jose Monroy trying to close up on Brian Caldwell. Caldwell really is struggling for pace at this point. There is Monroy right in behind him. So they still battle away for position, but obviously with the pit stop going in then for Jason Minshaw ahead of Melling, and also a pit stop for Caldwell and Clark. So that is the other Caldwell and Clark. That's John Caldwell, who's brought the car into the pits, and he'll give his car over to Kieran Clark, I'm sure. But this is for the race lead now, and Monroy is all over the back of Brian Caldwell. Brian Caldwell in the Cobra versus Jose Monroy in his similar AC Cobra 289. One of them's got to give here, and Jose Monroy looks fired up and motivated. It's England versus Portugal in Portugal's backyard, of course. So this is going to be a fascinating duel between the two drivers, Brian Caldwell and Jose Monroy, really having a great race of it as they continue their journey forward. As Alice Locke has come into the pits to hand over to her father, Richard. Bit of Bit of a lock up there for Jose Monroy as he continues to pile on the pressure to Clark. Still they motor on. When is Monroy going to get his opportunity on the inside line here of the 72 of Brian Caldwell, really starting to hustle him as they go through the left-hander. Both cars sliding. But you do get a real sense. And there is going to be a drive-through penalty for two cars. And as Bernardo Colbe predicted, one of them is going to be the 72. Brian Caldwell has picked up a drive-through. White lining the pit exit has cost them dearly. The other car to get a penalty is Sandy McEwen and Stephen Gray in the MGB, but that means then that the number 72, Brian Caldwell, has picked up a drive-through penalty for white lining the pit lane exit. Just as Bernardo Colbe predicted on the live stream. Dear, oh dear, oh dear. Well, Jose Monroy wants to make the overtake on him before he even has to come in for the drive-through. But there's certainly no pressure on the Portuguese driver now, as Jose Monroy, sharing that car with Pedro Macedo Silva, who did such a good job in the opening stint, doesn't even have to overtake Caldwell, because Caldwell has received a drive-through penalty for white lining on the exit of the pit lane. That means that they've essentially gone back out onto the circuit and crossed the white line of the pit lane exit to do so. You're not allowed to do it. It's there for safety reasons, and it's a blend line for safety. Here's Jose Monroy, though. It's going to be academic. Monroy's going to try and make the overtake. Caldwell is desperately trying to hang on to it. He's going to lock up through the hairpin, and Monroy's going to get fast acceleration off the turn, and Jose Monroy is going to hit the front. The one Portuguese team in this race now leads on home soil. What a battle up front. And Jose Monroy has got into the lead. Brian Caldwell, rather sadly, is going to have to come into the pits for a drive-through penalty for white lining. Cannot cross the white line on the exit of the pit lane. It's very hard to avoid it because these cars are very leery. Don't forget, not a single one of these cars has got traction control. It's all about pure racing, pure grit, and pure driving ability. They're very leery. We see a lot of sideways action under brakes in these cars. Jose Monroy has taken the lead here. Big lock up again from Brian Caldwell. Not easy to get this car stopped. It's so quick in a straight line, the Cobra 289. So it's definitely going to make for an exciting continuation for the race now, as the Portuguese team, Jose Monroy and Pedro Macedo Silva, are going to be leading the way. They already took the lead on merit, but now they're going to have a very decent cushion, as Brian Caldwell, I think on this lap, if not the next one, is going to be coming in to serve a drive-through penalty. What a shame. It's great news for the Portuguese fans watching. Let's have another look at the replay. Now this is Caldwell exiting the pit lane, so we'll be able to see how they picked up the penalty. Let's double check and confirm it. Oh yeah, I'm afraid that's pretty slam dunk, isn't it? Not even up for debate. Rules are rules. And I'm afraid it's Brian Caldwell that just ends up pushing too hard on the pit lane exit. So that's going to remove him from the fray for the time being, at least. Hopefully they'll be able to make up the ground and get back into it again as we approach the end of the first hour. And it's a 2-hour race, this one. Up over the top of the Bray. And up the inside. Oh, a bit of a mistake from Monroy. Caldwell gets back up the inside line. They're going to go side by side off the turn. Monroy powers out of the corner and manages to maintain the lead. Oh, this is going to be so disappointing when Caldwell comes in for the drive-through, because we're going to be robbed. We're going to be absolutely robbed of a great battle between these two. But certainly for the Portuguese fans watching along, their men are now leading. Jose Monroy and Pedro Macedo Silva in the 1965 red AC Cobra 289. That's on your screen. Doing an absolutely terrific job at the moment. Right, let's give you an update of the class leaders now that pretty much everybody has made their first pit stop. Yes, indeed, everybody's made at least one pit stop now. So let's talk you through the order. It is Pedro Macedo Silva and Jose Monroy that lead the way in their AC Cobra in the GT4 category. Then it's Brian Caldwell and Kieran Clark second. Then it's Chris Charles Senior and Junior in third. It's now Martin Melling who's behind the wheel of the Jaguar E-Type low drag that he shares with Jason Minshaw. They're in fourth place. Then we've got Darren Dunn behind the wheel of the Lotus Elan 26R that he shares with Robert Cull. And Then we have Charlie Martin, who is behind the wheel of the SP1 Jaguar C-Type, sharing that car with Rudi Friedrichs, the German talent who started the race. They're in 6th position and leading SP1. Then all the way up to 7th place has come Andy Newell, having taken over for Reyes Salter, the German driver. So Andy Newell is up to 7th position and charging hard in that Jaguar E-Type. So we need to keep an eye on that number 52 that bagged the pole position yesterday, of course. Then we've got Mark Shaw sharing his Lotus Elan with Joel Hopwood in 8th place. 9th position, oh, another lock-up from Caldwell, who really is flirting with the limits now. And obviously still needs to come in to serve that drive-through penalty. Behind Hopwood and Shaw, we've got Pangio and Woods. I'm going to keep calling him that. Mark Pangborn alongside Harvey Woods in the 64 Austin Healey 3000, number 58. And in 10th position, we have got, it's Chris Clarkson now who's behind the wheel of the car he shares with David Smithies. That's another Austin Healey 3000. 11th place, it is the other Caldwell and Clark combination. So that is obviously going to be the car of John Caldwell, who is now currently having given that car over to Kieran Clark. They're in the Austin Healey 3000, number 119. They're currently in 11th position, ahead of Russell and Samways. So it's the former motorcycle racer Michael Russell who shares that car with Ollie Samways. And Samways is currently behind the wheel of the 168 Austin Healey 3000, as far as I'm aware. Then it is Billy Bellinger doing a great job racing very well indeed. James Bellinger along with Simon Orobi-Gann in their Morgan Plus 4 SS. They're currently 13th at the moment. 14th place, it is now Daniel Ross Jones, who has taken over from father Alan Ross Jones in their Triumph TR4. 15th position, Nigel Greensall has taken over from Matt Walton in their Jaguar E-Type in 15th. Then the TC1 leaders, who do have a penalty coming, of course. That's Rick Turner and Bruce Galliford, but they have a penalty that's obviously been applied to them previously. I need to double check what that was for. It was for speeding in the pits, actually, so that's going to give them a drive-through penalty. Very unfortunate. Surely Caldwell has got to come into the pits at some point to serve his drive-through penalty as well, because he's already been handed it. He comes over the top of the crest, and he's certainly not served it any time recently, because Monroe's still there. We've got to be careful they don't get disqualified for ignoring the drive-through. Anyway, still the battles rage on. Behind Turner and Galliford, we've got the German pair Florian and Julius Brandt in their TVR Grand Tourer Mark III. Then we've got Ian Bankhurst sharing his MGB with Hugh Lafferty. They are currently in 2nd position in the category. Smith-Hilliard and Griffiths are obviously still together. That's Max Smith-Hilliard and Miles Griffiths sharing the Lotus Mark 10. They are 2nd in SP1 and they are 19th at the moment. And Nick Rutter has taken over from George Grant at the wheel of the MGB that's run by Rob Boston Racing. They led in the early stages, of course, and are still looking good for the victory overall. They've just got to continue their consistent running. They're in 3rd at the moment in GT2, just ahead of the combination of Stephen Gray and Sandy McEwen in their MGB number 74. Then we've got the combination of the Morgan Plus 4 SS, the pairing of Simon King and Richard Plant. Very good work at the moment from them as they continue on. Simon King did a very good job in the opening stint, and now they're back into contention for the podium. Also good to see Steve Monk sharing that Porsche 911 from Peter Tognola, one of the very first Porsches, of course, that 911. That's the car that replaced the 356. Origins, of course, from the Volkswagen Beetle that was designed by Dr. Ferry Porsche. Of course, the design of this one, the 1965 Porsche 911, actually came from his son Butzi, Ferdinand Porsche. Behind them, it is the Birchenhoff and Topless pairing. That's Ellie Birchenhoff and then Nick and James Topless in the Austin Mini Cooper S. They are currently 2nd in TC1, looking good for the victory if they keep going. Ironically enough, Ellie Birchenhoff, the Austin Mini Cooper, is just ahead of the MGB that James and Nick Topless are sharing, so very close together, those two cars. And then we've got the father and daughter combination of Richard and Alice Locke in their Broadspeed Mini GTS. They are currently in 26th position. Then it is Bruce Montgomery sharing his car with Jeremy Welch. They had all sorts of problems earlier on in the pits and were in for a long time. I think they actually had a grand total of 3 visits to the pits, and that's why they are currently down in 27th position. Then it is the combination of Gregor Fiskin, now behind the wheel of the HWM Jaguar that he shares with the Canadian Dean Baker. They are in 28th position. Then we've got the Austin Mini Cooper S number 129. That is the car of Alastair Pugh, sharing that car with Richard Parsons. They're currently in 4th in TC1. And then we've got more problems for the combination of Welch and Muirhead. So Jeremy Welch racing 2 Austin Healey's today. One he's sharing with Bruce Montgomery, the other one with Doug Muirhead, and that's the car that's currently in trouble in the pits. Christian Oldendorf is currently back out on the course again in his Giulia TZ2. And he's the only driver in that Alfa Romeo Giulia TZ2, and he's down at the back of the field in GT2. And then, of course, after their little breakdown earlier on, mechanical breakdown, nothing else, don't worry, Rob Newell and Oliver Marseille in their Jaguar XK120 at the back of the field. All 32 cars are still circulating in the pits at the moment. We've got Baker and Fiskin in the HWM Jaguar, and we've got Muirhead and Welch, who are still in the pits as we go into the second hour of racing here at Portimao. Halfway through, halfway still to go. Currently watching the MGB out on the course there. I think that was Nick Topless in his particular car, as we watch Chris Charles Sr., 3rd position in his AC Cobra. And they're chasing down one of the TC1 cars. That looks like the Mini of, is that Ellie Birchenhau's car? Currently leading as they are in the battle for 2nd position of TC1. Turner and Galliford, of course, still need to make their pit stop a little bit later on in the mix. It is Ellie Birchenhau in that car. As into the pits again comes Martin Melling. So Martin Melling comes in to hand the car over to Jason Minshaw once again, as we get our way closer to the 2nd pit stop of 3 for those who are making 3 pit stops. But we are now in the 2nd hour of the GT and SPORTSCAR Cup Pre-1966 2-hour race here at the Algarve Classic, here at the Autódromo Internacional Algarve in Portimao in Portugal. Jake Sanson with you here in the commentary box. And what a battle it's been so far. Great racing between these competitors. They really have given us plenty of entertainment right from the start. It's been AC Cobra all the way, 1st, 2nd and 3rd in this race at the moment. Looking like it's going to stay that way. The SP1 leaders are Rudy Fredericks and Charlie Martin in their Jaguar C-Type, the oldest car in the race, currently running in 7th position overall. The leaders in GT3 are Harvey Woods and Pangio himself, Mark Pangborn, in their Austin Healey 3000 number 58. That is the 1964 car. Leaders in TC1, Turner and Galliford, but for how much longer? Because they've obviously got to take a pit lane speeding penalty. The 102 is currently still leading, though, Bruce Galliford and Rick Turner. And leading in GT2 at the moment, it is the TVR Grand Tourer Mark III of Julius and Florian Brandt, the German pair. So they are currently 1st and 2nd place, with Lafferty and Bankhurst 2nd in their MGB, and then it's George Grant and Nick Rutter who are 3rd in theirs. So much of the race still to come, of course. And up and over the top of the crest, we're waiting to see who that is. It's going to be Charles Sr. So Chris Charles Sr. watched his son out in the car a little bit earlier on. And into the braking zone for that very tough hairpin at the bottom of the hill, because of course you have to brake quite early into the corner because it's downhill, so it's actually going to be a lot tougher to slow the car down under so much physical exertion. But what a great race battle it has been so far in this race. We've still got 1 hour to go, plenty of great racing still left of it, and it looks as though Joel Hopwood has got back behind the wheel of the Lotus Elan that he shares with Mark Shaw, and they have just left the pits. Jason Minshaw is, of course, going to take back the wheel of the Jaguar E-Type low drag that he shares with Martin Melling. Jason Minshaw, of course, a name very familiar with the modern era of motor racing, son of Alan, who founded the Demon Tweaks Motorsport Company, which is based just 10 miles from where I used to live in the United Kingdom, in fact. Big slide still from the leading car. Still haven't seen that drive-through from Cordwell. I wonder if he knows he's got to take it. Must be so busy focusing on his run for 2nd place. But ignorance is no excuse. If you are looking for your boards, then you're going to see that you've been given a penalty. So far, I've noticed that neither the 102 nor the 72 have taken their drive-throughs. I'm not entirely sure if Sandy McEwen and Stephen Gray have. I think the best way to tell is if they've come into the pits 3 times or if they've come into the pits 2. They've come in 2 times. Everybody else around them has only done it once. So that would suggest to me that they have served their drive-through penalty. Not entirely sure if Caldwell or Galliford are going to have a little bit of a headache for taking so long to serve theirs. As there goes Caldwell, making the overtaking move there on Alastair Pugh in the Austin Mini Cooper S from 1965. One of the 3 years that not that particular car, of course, but that particular model of car, the Austin Mini Cooper S, took the victory in the Monte Carlo Rally. The only year it didn't in that 4-year period was 1966. Go and read about it. It's a fascinating story. Pedro Macedo Silva and Jose Monroy, the 2 Portuguese talents in their red AC Cobra that they've decided to race in convertible mode, having a fantastic race of it at the moment. They are in command of their faculties and they lead on home soil. It'd be very fitting if they were able to go. Look at the steering work that is going into Jose Monroy's car just to get it round that hairpin, because you've got to be so delicate with the steering here. You turn in too much, the back end's going to kick out and overtake the front. And this is a very long pit stop, in fact, for the Jaguar E-Type low drag of Melling and Minshaw. They're not getting out in the scheduled time, and they've gone down a lap, so very much not according to schedule. I think that's some kind of mechanical malady, we can only assume. Very unfortunate indeed for them, because it really takes them out of contention. So it looks like it is going to be Cobras all the way as Monroy manages to get around Jeremy Welch's Austin Healey. So Jeremy Welch obviously sharing a car with Doug Muirhead, but also sharing a car with Bruce Montgomery. I'm fairly sure it is Jeremy Welch behind the wheel at the moment. Oh, big turn in there from Monroy, having to be very careful not to slide into the side of the Morgan Plus 4SS of Richard Plant and Simon King, I think that is. Their particular car. We're going over the top of the crest anyway, certainly having a very tight race of it as they continue. It's not actually their car, my apologies, it's the 161 that they were lapping. That's Bellinger and Otobi Gann. So there goes Monroy. Just wait, yeah, just wait to get the move on the inside of Florian Brandt. The TVR Grand Tourer, the silver car. And there's another drive-through penalty that's been handed out. This time it's for the 119. So that is the other Caldwell and Clark combination. Unbelievable that both Kieran Clark's cars have now got penalties for drive-through. One of them is for speeding the pit lane, speeding in the pit lane in the entry. The other one is for running the white line. So both cars have now got penalties. That's rather unfortunate indeed for Kieran Clark. He can't believe his luck. He's got one drive-through penalty in one car, and then the other cars pick one up as well. So when this all sorts itself out, there's going to be very long faces in both camps. And certainly no long faces at the Portuguese contingent. Jose Monroy and Pedro Macedo Silva using their knowledge of the car and their superior knowledge of the circuit to good advantage. They have managed to work their way through and done a fantastic job to get themselves up into position. They started this race all the way back in 9th on the grid, and here they are now leading it. So there again is Brian Caldwell. Still no sign of their drive-through penalty, I notice. They're still right there behind the red Cobra. We've got a yellow flag at turn 9. We've got a yellow flag at turn 9 by the look of it, so something has gone awry there. I wonder if we'll get to see it on a replay, because the yellow flag has now been withdrawn. Not quite sure who it was for. We didn't see it, unfortunately. As up the inside, there goes Brian Caldwell again to put a lap on one of the tail enders. It is the gorgeous number 64 car of Dean Baker and Gregor Fiskin. Finally, we get to see that HWM Jaguar. Of course, HWM standing for Hersham and Walton Motors. It is the oldest Aston Martin dealership in the entire world, HWM. It's kind of stayed in its capacity all the way through its time. Of course, they built Formula One cars between 1951 and 1954. They used Alta engines in those cars. But they've had an affiliation with Aston Martin very much since the start of their manufacturing. And yes, indeed, HWM, Hersham and Walton Motors, is the oldest Aston Martin dealership on the planet. Lovely swan through there from Brian Caldwell, just keeping himself nice and tidy as he works his way past the minis. They're all fairly close together, actually. And it's been very rare to see them all together. You're currently looking, you just saw briefly there, Ellie Birchoff, currently running in front of Locke and I think Turner. It might actually have been Alistair Pugh thinking about it. So as the minis all run close together, you'll be able to notice one mini is very different to the other four because it has that long tail. That's the Broadspeed Mini. Very special car, that, designed by Tony Bloor, built by Ralph Broad. Only 28 of them were ever built for the road. Over half of them actually got exported to Spain, of all places. But when Motorsport magazine tested that car, when it was built, it managed to reach a top speed of 112 miles an hour. 112 miles an hour in a Mini. That's mad, but very, very impressive. So there is Brian Caldwell, still in the AC Cobra 289, still sliding the car around. And I've got a feeling that they're going to have to take the drive-through penalty at the next driver change, because I don't think Brian Caldwell has really got the message about the drive-through. He certainly hasn't served it. Nor, interestingly enough, has Rick Turner in the Austin Mini Cooper S that he shares with Galliford. So Bruce Galliford, neither driver taking the drive-through penalty there by the look of it. They've certainly been issued it because it's on the timing screens for all to see. So through the contenders continue. Up over the top of the crest, we've still got some good battles all the way through the field. Let's update you with the podium of each of the classes. I think that's the best way to go about things at the moment. As into the pits comes Charles Senior. So Chris Charles Senior has brought his Cobra into the pits in what was third position. So it's still Chris Charles Senior and Junior in third place in their AC Cobra. Second place is Brian Caldwell and Kieran Clark. And you're looking at the race leaders, both in GT4 and overall. Jose Monroy and Pedro Macedo Silva in their red AC Cobra 289. There is the number one into the pits. So that is Chris Charles Senior getting out. Chris Charles Junior gets in. And expect to see them charge their way as close to the front of the field as they can possibly stretch to. The leaders just lapping the 58 car there. That is Mark Pangborn and Harvey Woods in their Austin Healey 3000. They managed to get out of the way there in good nick to make sure that they don't hold them up. In the SP1 category, there are only 3 cars, so we can talk you through the podium fairly quickly. Rudy Friedrichs and Charlie Martin in their Jaguar C-Type are currently running 6th overall, and they lead in the SP1 category. Second place is Max Smith-Hilliard and Miles Griffiths in their Lotus Mark 10. And then in third place, it is the HWM Jaguar that Dean Baker, the Canadian, shares with the British driver Gregor Fiskin, who is, I'm fairly sure, the only driver in Le Mans 24 Hours history to have raced 4 times and raced in 4 different classes in 4 consecutive years. That might be a record. Somebody may need to check that for me. In GT3, we've got an amazing battle going on at the moment, and we've got the leading car in GT3 of John Caldwell and Kieran Clark in the Austin Healey 3000. Their car has been given a penalty for speeding in the pit lane. So that's going to change the lead fairly dramatically, and that's going to be handed over to Mark Pangborn and Harvey Woods in their Austin Healey 3000. Third position is the Morgan Plus 4SS that is currently being shared by Simon Arabi-Gann and Billy Bellinger, James Bellinger. So there is an almighty battle for GT3. That's going to continue on through the race, and it will be tough to know who's going to come out on top of the victory for that one. In TC1, at the moment, it is still Rick Turner and Bruce Galliford that lead in their 1960 Austin Mini Cooper S. They're in front of Richard and Alice Locke in their Broadspeed. Then in third place, it is Ellie Birchenhoff, along with Nick Topless in their 1963 Austin Mini Cooper S. They're ahead of Parsons and Pugh in theirs. And then in GT2, what a battle we've got going on in GT2, because at the moment, the leaders in the MGB category, I say the MGB category, it's actually GT2. There are more than just MGBs. We're looking at the number 58 out on the course at the moment. That is Mark Pangborn and Harvey Woods that are trying to get into the lead of GT3 and could be assisted there by the penalty that is going the way of John Caldwell and Kieran Clark for speeding in the pits at the last pit stop. But in GT2 at the moment, it is Ian Bankhurst and Hugh Lafferty that leads the race, with George Grant and Nick Rutter very close behind them indeed in the Rob Boston racing car, as the number 58 puts that arm out the window. Harvey Woods lends a hand to the number 1 of Chris Charles Jr. and lets him go. Thank you very much indeed, says Chris Charles Jr. It's all so friendly as they run at over 100 miles an hour out of that final turn. Very sporting. Now look at how quickly Chris Charles Jr. is getting on terms with the 2 cars in front. He really is making big gains, as these 2 cars could well be numbered up front. Fascinating stuff as the racing continues unabated. 3rd position, by the way, in GT2, we didn't get the chance to talk about it at great length, is actually the Porsche 911 now of Steve Monk and Peter Tognola, but it's not too far away for Simon King and Richard Plant in their Morgan Plus 4 SS. They're not far off 3rd place, so it's going to be a very exciting battle in GT2 all the way to the victory. Outlap for Michael Russell as he takes over the Austin Healey 3000 from 1962 again from Ollie Samways. Michael Russell, of course, a former Isle of Man TT racer. So great to see that he not only races in the classic TT, but he also races in classic cars as well. Not many racers can claim that they've done 2- and 4-wheeled competition. And of course, there's only one man in the history of the sport that's ever been world champion on 2 wheels and 4. Is John Surtees back in 1964. So, some great battles at the moment. And it is a very close quarters situation for all of the contenders out there on the course, but there's still a lot to play for and a lot that can change in this race. 45 minutes left, so we're beyond half distance. We already knew that, but certainly with only 3/4 of an hour to go. And this beautiful Autódromo Internacional Algarve is going to give us a fantastic end to what has already been a fairly exciting race. Lots of changes, lots of overtaking, and lots of good battles through the field. But is it going to be a Portuguese paradise for the homeboys? Jose Monroy and Pedro Macedo Silva looking good for the victory at the moment. Brian Cordwell and Kieran Clark running their AC Cobra 289 in 2nd place further back, as the leaders are about to close in and lap Mark Shaw and Joel Hopwood, I believe, in their Lotus Elan. It's Robert Cole and Darren Dunn in the red Elan 26R, the racing version. A big lockup in a turn 1 for Brian Cordwell. Goodness me. A big lockup there. So that has really caused a headache for them. And he's got to be so careful that he doesn't overcook the car. He's got to be able to give the car back to Kieran Clark in good nick, but you can tell that Brian Cordwell is really stretching his own patience with that car at the moment. No worries at all for Jose Monroy leading the race. There is the number 19, that is Mark Shaw in his Lotus Elan. That's the standard spec version. We've got the 26R racing version also in the field for Robert Cull and Darren Dunn. But great to see so many great challenges all the way through the course of this field. And so many great cars in this race. I wanted to have a bit of a natter about the Morgan Plus 4 SS, because we've seen a few drivers behind the wheel of it, of course, including Simon King and Richard Plant, who are battling for the GT2 podium. We've also got a GT3 category contender in Simon Arabi-Gann and James Bellinger. The car, of course, the Morgan Plus 4, featured in the movie The War of the Roses. Kathleen Turner gave her husband in the movie, Michael Douglas, a version of the car as a birthday present before when they separated in the movie, quite dispassionately running it over in a GMC Jimny. It's amazing these stories that you come up with when you do your research, but there were just over 100 of the SS ever built, so the fact that we've got 2 of them in this very race, it tells you about the beauty and the longevity of the Morgan Plus 4. It's one of my favourite cars of all time, in fact, and also a story I heard while I was listening to Radio 4 the other day about the Morgan Plus 4, actually. The actress Sheila Hancock managed to flirt her way to the factory and jump the waiting list to acquire one back in the 1960s. So just goes to show you, great British racer, great British race car. And all for the love of a great British lady. Right, amazing driving coming in at the moment, as now Brian Cordwell finds himself under massive pressure from Chris Charles Jr. back behind the wheel of his AC Cobra, and he's overtaken the 72 as they've barnstormed their way past the traffic on the main straight. And it is the number 1 car back in front of the 72. There's a lapse difference, of course, because the number 1 car has been into the pits for a second time, and these two cars have not yet pitted for the second time. So don't panic, there's not been a change of position, there's only been a change of on-the-road riding. But this is great news for Chris Charles Jr., because if he's making this kind of pace now, when the other two cars make their pit stops, he could be taking the lead of the race back again. So there's some good battles going on everywhere you look. In all of the categories in this race, we've still got so much to play for. I'm sorry to say that since their last pit stop, Martin Melling and Jason Minshaw have not returned in their Jaguar E-Type low drag. So they have not gone any further at all. They're still in pit lane. And interestingly, so are Muirhead and Welch in their Austin Healey 106. So are Newell and Marseille in their Jaguar XK 120. They did venture out for a while, but I think their race is now done. And it looks as though the HWM Jaguar of Baker and Fiskin, Dean Baker, the Canadian TCR SCCC champion from last year, and Gregor Fiskin, the man who raced at Le Mans, I should say, in 4 different classes in 4 consecutive years during the mid-2000s. It looks like their car is not going any further either. So by my mathematics, if that's the case, we've got 4 retirements. Although having said that, Newell and Marseille have just gone out onto the circuit again. So they are on their outlap. So they're not out of the race. They're just a long way back after their breakdown earlier on still. There is Jose Monroy, still pushing. Still preparing for their second pit stop, of course. As Jose Monroy still trying to get the most out of this AC Cobra. Fabulous race car, and great to see so much pace and so much passion that this car gives. It doesn't matter when you look at this car, whether you look at it in period or whether you look at it now, it's still mighty impressive. Wonderful race cars, the AC Cobra. And really, really impressive that they still have massive longevity. Look at the pace coming from Chris Charles Jr. now. He wants to unlap himself from Monroy, and he's going to do it surely on this lap as he comes over the top of the crest. Looking very quick indeed, trying to make up some of the time lost in the last stint. And Chris Charles Jr. trying not to take too much of a risk here on Jose Monroy. But he's certainly got good pace in this car now. And of course, Jose Monroy has been in the car for quite a long time. So for Chris Charles Jr., this is a great chance for him to make up some of the ground lost. Working their way through the right-hand sweepers. And certainly doing a grand job of it at the moment. 40 minutes to go in this race. Still a lot of changes that could be made. As up into the lead of the race in TC1 has come Richard and Alice Locke in their mini broadspeed. That's got to be courtesy of the drive-through penalty for Turner and Galliford. So they drop to second place now in front of Bergenhow and Topless. Oh, big slide from Chris Charles Jr. Really wanting to put the Portuguese boys under pressure. And of course, if he unlaps himself, then that really gives him a bigger chance of taking the lead when the Portuguese pair make their inevitable next pit stop. There's a lot for Chris Charles Jr. here psychologically to gain on Jose Monroy. He's riding behind him. He's just going as flat out as he can, trying to make up as much time as possible. And there could be a run into the first corner here as Chris Charles Jr. looks really planted out of the final turn. Jose Monroy turns in. Look at the steering implication needed, the steering input needed to keep this car fairly smooth. Up over the top of the crest, and Chris Charles Jr.'s got a fast run. He's going to be in the slipstream. He's going to make the move surely as they go down the straight, and Chris Charles Jr. will unlap himself. He doesn't take the lead of the race yet. He unlaps himself from Jose Monroy, but when Monroy and Mercedes Silva come in for their pit stop, it's almost inevitable that we're going to see Chris Charles Jr. retake the lead of the race in the number 1 AC Cobra. Wow, fascinating stuff so far then in this race. And look at the way that Chris Charles Jr. has not only overtaken Monroy, but is just disappearing out in front. All going full guns blazing for him. Excellent work. Now, I think we just caught a glimpse there of Christian Oldendorf's beautiful Alfa Romeo Giulia TZ2. It was obviously leading in the early stages of GT2, but the car didn't quite have the longevity. I'm actually not sure if it was the car that didn't have the longevity, or was it Christian Oldendorf himself who was just a little bit worn out after the first stint. I think it may even have been something else entirely that caused the problem, but Oldendorf was your leader in GT2 and now has dropped a long way down the field. But that Alfa Romeo Giulia TZ2 still looking absolutely glorious. I'll point it out when they come up towards it, which is any moment now, in fact. They've got Peter Tognola and Steve Monk's Porsche just in front of them. Very first Porsche 911. There it is. That's a gorgeous car, isn't it, the Giulia? You'll see it. It's the next car that the leaders are going to lap. As the Morgan, oh, careful. You do not want to trip over that car just as you're going through. That is the Muirhead and Welch car, I believe, the 61. Oh, no, it's the 161. My apologies. So that is Aurélie Gann and James Bellinger. But the next car they're going to go past is that gorgeous Alfa Romeo Giulia TZ2. Only 8 of them have ever been built. Not sure where 8 came from. It's actually 12. I do apologise. So only 12 Alfa Romeo Giulia TZ2s were ever built. 170 brake horsepower in that car. As into the pits comes the Porsche. And down the straight, blasting past the Alfa Romeo Giulia TZ2 goes Chris Charles Jr. And it'll be Jose Monroy that is going to be the next one to work the way through. Now there is the Morgan +8. That is the car of Simon Aurélie Gann and James Bellinger. As into the pits comes another of the front-running cars. So that looks like the number 72. It is indeed. So that is Cordwell bringing his car in to give it over to Kieran Clark. And of course, they still need to do their drive-through penalty. I don't think they've actually taken that yet. But here are these 2 beautiful red machines. The one in front is the Alfa Romeo Giulia TZ2, one of only 12 of them in the entire world. And Jose Monroy and Pedro Macedo Silva sharing the AC Cobra that is fighting for the overall win. The car in front of them is the Rob Boston Racing GT2 MGB. Now that is the car that George Grant is sharing this year with Nick Rutter, his friend and colleague and former rival in the BRSCC Mazda Super Cup Masters category. 2 of them were racing rivals. They fought for the title. Nick Rutter won the title and then probably retired from motorsport. Oh yeah, Nick. Oh yeah. As soon as you got a decent racing car to get behind the wheel of again, of course you're going to have another go. Good man. No racing driver ever retires. They're just waiting for the right race seat. Up the inside of the Jaguar XK120 that's still limping along. Desperately trying to get to the end of the race, that's for sure. Not an easy task for the number 28, Rob Newell and Oliver Marseille. They're limping along rather begrudgingly. Now careful going out of the pits. You've already picked up 1 drive-through penalty for going over the white line on the way out of the pits. Don't do it again, for goodness sake. Now they're able to do it quite legally, as there goes Nick Rutter. And still that beautiful Alfa Romeo Giulia of Christian Oldendorf closing up behind them. Even if they get ahead of the MGB, it won't matter because they're several laps down. Right, into the pits is going to come the AC Cobra. Here we go. The last car of the leading group. 40-minute stints by the look of it. 2 pit stops then for Pedro Macedo Silva and Jose Monroy. So 40-minute stints is about right in the GT4 category. They've obviously chosen who's going to be starting and who's going to be finishing the races. So we'll have to see if Jose Monroy stays in the car or if it's going to be Pedro Macedo Silva that gets back behind the wheel. But certainly those 2 are going to have a very strong time of it anyway. As I do believe we're now looking at Kieran Clark back behind the wheel of the 72 AC Cobra 289 again. And if that is the case, then of course the other car, the 119 Austin Healey 3000 from 1964, is now being driven by John Cordwell. It's got to be carefully coordinated to make sure that you've got a driver in the pits and a driver out on the circuit, especially when you've got 2 cars that you're running and 1 driver is doing double duty on both race cars. Goodness me, Kieran Clark is going to be shattered at the end of this one. Not the easiest cars to drive, and 2 completely different race cars that he's had to drive. Out of the pits then goes the Portuguese pairing, and where is the number 7, where is the number 1 AC Cobra in relation to them? Did they already go through? Not sure they have actually, so I think they've managed to get out with their lead intact. So obviously both cars are now on their out laps, but where is Charles Jr. by comparison? I think they're still leading the race now. So excellent news then for the Portuguese duo. as they lap Florian and Julius Brandt in their TVR Grand Tourer. The first ever TVR to be built. TVRs, of course, from Blackpool in England, only 3 years away from their 60th anniversary. There is the continuation then, the 72. Up the hill once again. And a very good run. Very good race battle. In fact, I think TVR might actually be celebrating their... oh no, they just missed, actually. Their 60th anniversary was in 2022. So that's when the Grand Tourer started to be produced. It's a very light and nimble car, that, 650 kilos only. As we look at the 72 of Kieran Clark. Definitely on the hunt once again. And the car behind them, that is the Broadspeed Mini we just saw. That's Alice Locke, I think, who's back behind the wheel of the car once again. So Alice Locke, who started the race, I think she's back behind the wheel once more. So we're getting to the closing stages then of this 2-hour race, and it looks as though it's going to be a Portuguese performance. A great tour de force from the only Portuguese crew in the race. Pedro Macedo Silva and Jose Monroy lead the race with half an hour remaining. Second place is the combination of Kieran Clark and Brian Cordwell. And then we've got the Charleses, father and son, Chris Charles Sr. and Chris Charles Jr. We're watching Kieran Clark now. Trying to remember how many pit stops has Kieran Clark had, but it says they've been in the pit lane twice. They should have been 3 times, of course, because they were given a drive-through penalty for cutting the pit lane exit. Now, does that mean that they'll have to take a drive-through penalty in the last half an hour then? I would have thought so, because surely they can't ignore the command they've been given. So Kieran Clark has got to figure out when they're going to take the drive-through penalty. But whatever the case, it'll obviously be discussed after the race if they don't take it, and a decision will have to be made. But we saw what we saw on the timing screen, that's for sure. Down the straight. Coming towards us, that is the Broadspeed Mini. That is Alice Locke sharing the car with her father, Richard. And they are currently battling for the victory in the TC1 category. They are currently second, ahead of Parsons and Pugh. Richard and Alastair in the number 129 car. And there coming towards us is the number 1. That is Chris Charles Jr. in the AC Cobra. Trying to close up on the cars ahead of them. Everybody in the leading bunch has now made their second pit stop. We're still waiting for the second pit stop for Reyes Sorta and Andy Newell, by the way. They're up to 4th position now as a result of only having pitted once. But I do get the feeling they're going to need to make another pit stop before the end. I don't think that anyone can go through with only 1 appearance in the pits. Yellow flags at turn 10 and 12. So we've got yellow flags on 2 separate parts of the circuit, according to the timing screen. But both corners, the yellow flags have been removed. So it's only a quick spin rather than a big accident. That's good news. As there goes the Broadspeed Mini, the number 53 car, having been lapped there by the number 1, Chris Charles Jr., having taken over from his father once again. So some good racing all the way, and we are just getting towards the final few laps then of this brilliant race battle. It's been great to watch it with you all the way through. Jake Sanson in the commentary box here at the Algarve Classic on the Autódromo Internacional Algarve here in Portimao. We've had some proper good motorsport from these beautiful cars aged between 1953 and 1966. The pre-66 category of the GT and Sports Car Cup. Its 4th visit over the course of a very packed calendar. Started the year at Enna in Sicily, one of my favourite race circuits in the world. Then on to Silverstone, the home of British motor racing. And then last time out to Castle Combe, where so many of these amazing racing cars still get to race on pretty much an unblemished race circuit, almost exactly the same configuration that they raced it in period. It's not quite the same. There are a couple of extra chicanes, of course, but it's certainly the most complete race circuit that the cars would have raced in period. Enna hasn't changed much, admittedly, but I don't think Enna were racing quite as many cars of the same sort of ilk. So Silverstone's changed a lot, of course, since the time these cars would have raced in modern day period. But then, of course, from Ennepercusa to Silverstone to Castle Combe to here in glorious Portimao on the Autódromo Internacional Algarve. It's held pretty much everything there is to hold over the years, this fantastic circuit. It's held Formula One, it's held MotoGP, it even held the Karting World Championship a couple of years ago. And only a few weeks ago, it actually held the Gearbox Karting World Championship, so this is a fantastic facility. Great motorsport, no matter whether you like 2 wheels or 4, whether you like cars, bikes or karts. And it is really great to see the fantastic machinery of yesteryear still showing us what these amazing cars can do. Who needs traction control? Who needs yaw control? Who needs anti-lock brakes? Just give these guys proper horsepower, a steering wheel, a bucket seat, and a decent paint job. These guys will still give us plenty of entertainment as James and Nick Topless, their MGB, doesn't cause too much of a distraction for Chris Charles Jr. as he slingshots his way through on the left side of their car and then takes it nicely through the right-hander. Still, the battles continue to rage on the circuit. So for those who are, well, Jaspati says, where's the public? Well, you don't get the most massive crowds for vintage racing at the Algarve Classic. It's not Formula One, it's not going to sell out the crowds. I'll tell you that the public are actually on the start-finish straight in the grandstand to the right of your screen and in the pit lane gallery to the left of your screen as well. That's where most of the spectators will sit, although quite a few of them will actually be watching up at turn 5 as well. That grandstand is also open. So for those who are wondering why the stands are not packed, you don't tend to see many packed grandstands at Portimao, sadly. Unless it's for Formula One or MotoGP, you don't really get sellout crowds for motorsport in this part of the world. Up over the top of the crest, that's Florian and Julius Brandt, the Germans, in their TVR Grand Tourer Mark III. Fabulous race car. So it's going to be a really sensational battle as they continue on. Bernardo Colby has just come to the aid as well and just pointed out that if the circuit here was located in the north of Portugal, there would be a lot more spectators. And that is also a good point. You've got to remember that the Autódromo Internacional Algarve, whilst being a fantastic race circuit, and certainly nowadays the premier motor racing venue in Portugal, I think people who are fans of Estoril would probably argue with that, but I think it's a fair point. You have to remember, of course, that the circuit here is quite remote to get to. I've travelled here a couple of times for various events in the past, before this year, of course, and it's not the easiest race circuit to find. You've got to know where you're looking, and it can get lost in the hills very easily if you're not careful. So, yeah, it's a bit remote, this particular circuit, but the nearby seaside resort of Portimao, very pleasant indeed. I've had a very pleasant few nights here in the past, and it's a wonderful place to go motor racing, a fabulous facility. Always been massively fond of the Autódromo Internacional Algarve, and certainly in the days when we had our karting exploits here, it used to be wonderful taking the young racing drivers when they had finished their racing, taking them round the back to the football grounds behind the hotel. We would have some great nights as the sun went down. There is the youngsters Pedro Macedo Silva and Jose Monroy looking for a home victory as they climb up the hill once again through the left-hand sweeper. Just a few short minutes away, 22 minutes to be precise, until they can taste victory in their number 195 AC Cobra. Stalwarts of the classic and vintage scene. They've raced this car at various locations. They were at the Goodwood members meeting and the Goodwood Revival in the past. And they raced at Spa earlier this year in one of the classic weekends. So it's great to see that they are still very strong competitors, and they dearly, dearly wanted to win this race on their home soil. So it's going to be very fitting that we're going to give them a home victory. So for Pedro Macedo Silva and for Jose Monroy, it is a wonderful opportunity for them to continue their journey in fantastic form. So the contenders are still battling away, but out in front it is AC Cobra 1, 2 and 3. There are 3 Cobras in this race, and they are the cars to have. So if you're thinking about competing in this race in 2025 and you think, I want a great car to go racing in and I want to go for the victory, well, the lesson seems pretty clear in 2024, doesn't it? Get yourself a Cobra. So it's all going very well indeed for Messrs Macedo Silva and Monroy. The Portuguese pairing doing a great job out in first position, I should say, sorry. Then it is Brian Caldwell and Kieran Clark who are in second place in their car. And then Chris Charles Jr. trying to catch them in third position. Looking at the way the positions stack up in the other classes. Leading in SP1 at the moment, it is Rudy Fredericks and Charlie Martin in their Jaguar C-Type. They are currently running in 6th position overall and leading SP1. In 13th place in the Lotus Mark 10, it is Max Smith-Hilliard and Miles Griffiths. They are second in SP1. And still in the pits, having not moved for a while, sadly, Dean Baker and Gregor Fiskin in the HWM Jaguar from 1954 that we did see a short while ago, but unfortunately they are still in pit lane and have been here for quite some time now. In the GT3 battle, well, it's still pretty close. It is Matt Walton and Nigel Greensall that have worked their way through to the victory for the time being. There is the number 20 that we just talked about. Charlie Martin and Rudy Fredericks, the Brit and the German, having a very exciting race of it up at the sharp end. They are currently leading in SP1 ahead of the Lotus Mark 10 of Max Smith-Hilliard and Miles Griffiths, and there are no other contenders currently circulating in the SP1 category, with the Canadian Dean Baker and the British driver Gregor Fiskin in the pit lane. Back to GT3, we were just going to talk about them. Matt Walton and Nigel Greensall lead the way in GT3 in their E-Type Jag, and then Pangio and Woods are in second position. That is, of course, Mark Pangborn and Harvey Woods in their Austin Healey 3000, as we just watch Ellie Birchenhow and Nick Topless going through the picture in their Mini. There is the number 20. I do believe that is Rudy Fredericks back behind the wheel again after Charlie Martin took the car a little while ago. But also in GT3 we've got the battle. Oh, it looks as though actually Walton and Greensall have had their pit stop, and now Pangborn and Woods are going to have theirs, so they're going to swap positions again in rotation. Third place in GT300, that is the other Caldwell and Clark car. That's John Caldwell and Kieran Clark, and they are running in third position in the GT3 category. In GT2, my goodness, is it close. We've got the German twins of Julius and Florian Brandt. They are leading in their TVR Grand Tourer Mark III at the moment, but they are being caught by George Grant and Nick Rutter in their MGB prepared by Rob Boston Racing. So that's going to be an interesting run to the flag for them. Are they going to come up with second, or are they going to come up with a victory? They would certainly be very happy to be on the podium, but they would absolutely be euphoric to take the trophy back to Clapham North MOT on Monday morning and place it on pride of place on the garage mantelpiece. Third position at the moment, though. It's also going very well indeed for Hugh Lafferty and Ian Bankhurst in their number 57 GT2 MGB. So plenty of cars there. Oh, and into the pits, that is the 58. So that is Mark Pangborn and Harvey Woods. So that is a scheduled final pit stop, although I said it's a scheduled pit stop, but there's an awful lot of steam coming off the right front. Hopefully that is all expected, and just been racing a heat. Right, we've got the slippery oil flags out on the course. So something's happened. Somebody's dropped oil or dropped water, because we've got the slippery oil flags. I wonder if that is why Pangborn and Woods are in the pits, because they are the leaders, of course, in GT3. Well, speaking about the leaders, we're watching the car that is trying to get itself back into a race-winning position. This is the GT2. Well, we were just looking at the 57 of Hugh Lafferty and Ian Bankhurst. These are the two cars that are dueling over second place in the GT2 category. So two MGBs battling for supremacy, and they are trying to catch Florian and Julius Brandt. These three cars are together on track, fighting for the victory in GT2. This is the battle we've been waiting to see all race long, and there's nothing in it really between the three cars. So it's TVR versus a pair of MGBs, and the victory is still anybody's guess as to who's going to get it. Not too far away in fourth place is Simon King and Richard Plant in their Morgan Plus 4 SS. So there could still be a drama or two in the offing for them. And then, of course, we've got Tonyola and Monk in their Porsche. And we've got the toplesses, James and Nick, who are in 6th position in GT2 for them. In TC1, it's still Rick Turner and Bruce Galliford, who are currently leading in the TC1 category in their Austin Mini Cooper S. Then we've got the Mini Broadspeed GTS of Richard and Alice Locke, the father and daughter combination there. And then in 3rd position now, we have Richard Parsons and Alistair Pugh. They've got ahead of Ellie Birchenhow and Nick Topless in their particular machine. There is the leader in GT2, Julius and Florian Brandt, the TVR Grand Tourer. The first ever TVR to be built. This is the 1962 iteration of that particular car. So is it going to be a TVR that wins in GT2? Everybody says you should get yourself an MGB if you want to fight for the victory, and that's certainly been the state of play in the past. There is the 2nd place car just coming into view. That was George Grant, really pushing hard here to try and get the focus back on their terms, but TVR Grand Tourer still looking pretty solid and consistent out front, a few seconds up the road. And Hugh Lafferty and Ian Bankhurst want to get themselves in the 2nd position if they can on the main straight, battling away for position. George Grant versus Hugh Lafferty as they come into the first turn. In the background, we're currently looking at the leaders in GT2. That's Florian Brandt. But it's been really fascinating to see which of the competitors is going to come through as the leader in GT2, and certainly at the moment it's the TVR Grand Tourer, but 2nd position is very much up for grabs between the 2 MGBs behind them. Hugh Lafferty in his 1963 car versus George Grant in his 1965 machine. Up over the top of the crest. Good run so far from Julius and Florian Brandt, the German team, in their gorgeous TVR Grand Tourer Mark III from 1962. Lovely machine this. This car actually continued production until 1967. So there's not so many Grand Tourers in the world, only 796 of them in total, and even fewer of the Mark III. It's a very rare car, but it's perfect for classic racing. It's a great little car, very well balanced, good acceleration. It's a fairly dependable TVR as well. It hasn't really hit any trouble at all in this race. They've not really had to break a sweat at any point, despite the fact that they're only leading by a few seconds. They've just let this race come naturally to them. So apparently the Rob Boston Racing MGB GT is actually on the back foot at the moment, because they were wrongfully called into the refueling area, into the Parc Ferme area. They lost about 35 seconds. So that's interesting, because if that then obviously if they were indeed incorrectly called to the Parc Ferme and they've lost half a minute, they could reallocate that 30 seconds to them. So there's a good chance that the Rob Boston Racing MGB could actually return to the leading position if that 30 seconds is given back to them. So it's been an interesting one. Now, I'm also told that I was obviously talking a little bit earlier on about the combination of Jason Minshaw and Martin Melling. They are in the pit lane. The reason for that is that, unfortunately, Martin Melling was unwell, so he was not able to take the car. He didn't feel very well at all, so Jason Minshaw was driving the car solo, and I guess either they had a problem with the car or Jason Minshaw was worn out, and as a result of that, they couldn't return to the circuit anymore. Up on the inside, though, the leaders continue their fantastic run, and it is going very well indeed for the Portuguese pair. Pedro Macedo Silva and Jose Monroy are just 12.5 minutes away from the victory in their AC Cobra. The 3 Cobras in this race, of course, all coming from the 289 Sports package. It's the AC car that is going to be an interesting one as they continue to battle away. But it will be a really exciting, oh, bit of a tank slapper there from the 195 car. A real slide of the decks there. Pedro Macedo Silva and Jose Monroy going to have a really exciting slide as they continue on. Heavy braking for the hairpin through to the left-hander. But a really exciting battle as they continue on full pelt up the hill once again through the left kink. but it's been absolutely fantastic. Yellow flags at turn 4 and 5. Right, we've got to be careful at that particular point on the course. That's where you can get a lot of flotsam and jetsam if you're not careful. So the yellow flags are out at turn 4 and 5. That's a couple of corners back from where we're currently looking. So I'm not entirely sure whether that's a permanent issue or whether that's a difficult one. So an interesting situation. There you go. That's the pit board being shown to the number 53, I think. That is Richard Locke and Alice Locke, or are they pointing out that they're 53 seconds clear? It says Valoroso on the pit board. I'm not entirely sure whether that refers to the team or whether that refers to a driver, or it certainly doesn't sound like a driver to me. But certainly on the pit wall, people are getting excited about the prospect of the checkered flag. But it's, arm in the air saying thank you very much indeed to the back marker for Pedro Macedo Silva and Jose Monroy as they manage to work their way past. Still going well for the AC Cobra. Look how fast they are when they come onto the straight. It's such a rapid machine. You wouldn't have thought, would you, that this car was built in the 60s. It still looks pretty impressive now. It's still not really skipping a beat, is it? But it's going to have to be careful going round the outside of Bruce Montgomery and Jeremy Welsh in their big Healy. Timing is everything when you go through the traffic in heritage racing. The last thing you want to do is spear your car into the side of a competitor, and it can be very easy to do. So still good racing at this present time. And there's green flags there, so that says to me that there's a car that's actually, it looks to me that there's a car that's actually parked it at the side of the road. That looks like the Triumph TR4 that's broken down, I'm afraid to say. I think the Triumph TR4 has actually stopped out on the circuit. That's the car that Alan Ross Jones shares with his son Daniel. So the Triumph TR4 appears to have stopped out on the road. That's disastrous for them in GT3 because they were battling for the podium. And it looks to me as though it's game over for them. Game over too for the Austin Healey 3000 of Pangborn and Woods. That steam that was coming out of the car was terminal. So the win for them sadly gone. And that really has changed things quite dramatically in the race. It means that the GT3 victory is going to go the way of Matt Walton and Nigel Greenstall after all. Second place is going to be Michael Russell, the motorcycle racer that he shares the car with Ollie Samways. And in third position, it is going to be the car of John Caldwell and Kieran Clark that had that drive-through penalty a little earlier on. So they are at least going to come away with a third position in class. So still, the battles rage on. I'm interested in the lack of drive-through penalty for Caldwell and Clark overall, though, because they were awarded it. I don't know whether it's been deleted or not. I'm looking through the messages, and certainly doesn't look like it. Ironically enough, there were two pit lane speeding penalties given to the number 52 of Sutter and Newell, which is why they've come into the pits a third time. So Reyes Salter, the German talent, and Andy Newell. There's the crowd, all sat on the main straight, waiting to see the victory come through, and it is going to be Charles Jr. that has fought his way through to second position in the closing stages. Only 8 minutes to go. Yellow flags are still out at turn 4 and 5. That has got to be for the stricken Triumph TR4 of Alan Ross Jones. Very unfortunate indeed for him, parking the car in the closing stages of this race. Who's stuck in pit lane, not going anywhere, because everybody should be out on circuit now. Well, Pangborn and Woods, who retired in their GT3 Austin Healey 3000. They were leading at one point, but they're now out of it. It looks like Hopwood and Shaw have parked their Lotus Elan as well. That's very unfortunate for them. They were looking good for a GT4 top 5 finish at one stage. Fifth position has now gone the way of Sauter and Newell. We also had the retirement for Jason Minshaw. He was obviously driving the Jaguar E-Type low drag car alone after Martin Melling fell ill prior to the race. But they obviously developed a problem in that car as well, and he's out of the race. Baker and Fiskin in the HWM Jaguar. Dean Baker, the Canadian, and the British driver Gregor Fiskin, they developed a technical fault with their HWM Jaguar. So third position in SP1 was all they were likely to get anyway, but they are not going to finish the race, sadly. And also problems for Doug Muirhead, the very popular Austin Healey 106 driver, that he shares the car with Jeremy Welch. They have completed fewer laps than anybody else in the race, and very sadly they're not going to get to the end of the race either. Everybody else is still circulating other than those cars that I've mentioned, and we're in the closing stages as Chris Charles Jr. desperately tries to catch up to see if there's anything he can do about the 42-second deficit he's currently got. But the closest race battle that we've got on the circuit at the moment is actually for the GT2 victory. There's only 5 seconds that George Grant and Nick Rutter have got to make up on Florian and Julius Brandt in the last 5 minutes of the race. And let's not forget that if they get that 30 seconds back that they were handed earlier on, then they could be given the victory of this race. So there's still quite a lot that could unfold in the closing minutes, but certainly the victory in GT2, the battle between those 3 cars is not very big at all. There's only about 13 seconds or so between those cars. So it is very tight indeed between those competitors. But there is Chris Charles Jr. still trying to push on. Oh, sorry, no, that is Kieran Clark finishing off the race for the AC Cobra in 3rd position. Still yellow flags at 4 and 5. I think they'll be there for the entirety of the rest of the race, because we've only got 5.5 minutes left to go. So up over the top of the crest again. And it's looking very solid and strong indeed for the AC Cobra pair out in the front position. The Portuguese pair, Pedro Macedo Silva and Jose Monroy, they took the lead at about the hour mark, and they've held it for a long time. They've been so solid. Oh, careful into turn 1. That car still squealing under brakes, but just finely poised. There is the race leading car. And I'm sure that the local fans will be very happy indeed to see that car out in the 1st position. It's been really, really strong indeed. But a really exciting situation. And it looks as though it's going to be a Portuguese victory on home soil as we just take a quick look at Sandy McEwen and Stephen Gray in their MGB. But it is going to be the 2 Portuguese talents that will bring their AC Cobra to the victory if they can just keep it together for these last couple of laps of racing. The lap times that they've been setting, well, the best time that has been set in this race has been a 2 minutes 7.5. I think that was when Chris Charles Jr. really had his dander up. Did a 2 minutes 7.5 at one stage of the race. They're currently in the 2 minute 11s at the moment. So as they come through across the line, we are going to have the penultimate lap this time by. Looks as though the Lotus Elan just up the road has got to be careful that he doesn't lose components. That's Robert Cull and Darren Dunn in their Elan 26R, the red machine. So the yellow flags are going to stay present at turn 4 and 5. By my math, we're on the penultimate lap of racing now. So it's all just about crossing those T's and dotting those I's. Excellent work from Messrs. Pedro Macedo Silva and Jose Monroy. Not that they don't mind getting the back end slapped out a bit more. When you drive an AC Cobra, you drive it the way it's supposed to be driven, hard. Great racing from these 2. This is a proper racing car driven by 2 proper racing superstars. Great to see them out front, putting on a great spectacle and a great display. So through they come, up the top of the crest, a lap and a half to go in this GT and Sports Car Cup race. 2 hours of racing. Thank goodness we actually had a race, because last year we had a bit of a bath rather than a motor race. It was horrendous conditions last year. I remember being soaked to the skin, stood in pit lane last year. And there was very little racing under green conditions. I think about 45 minutes at minimum of the race was under safety car as we watched the Portuguese AC Cobra pair going past one of the most interesting cars in the entire field, the Broad Speed Mini, which was described in Motor Magazine many, many years ago as a scaled-down Aston Martin DBR1, which is a very interesting description for a Mini. Up on the inside of the David Smithies, Chris Clarkson, Austin Healey goes the overall race leader. Just nipping their way through the traffic. Nip one, pearl one, drop one, curl one, and then get yourself onto the final racing lap. Scamper around this Algarve circuit one more time, and you'll be victorious. Of all the British crews that came here, the team that started from 9th on the grid, they had a game plan. They knew exactly what they were going to need to do to get this race won. Just exactly what they do best. Drive like you mean it and go for the victory. Now, we've got 7 seconds between the GT2 category, first and second place, and another 12 seconds back are Lafferty and Bankhurst. So it's not impossible that the GT2 podium could change, but it looks as though it's going to finish this way, unless, of course, the Rob Boston Racing MGB of Nick Rutter and George Grant is given back that half minute that they lost in the pit lane, in which case, if it doesn't happen, then it will go to the TVR Grand Tourer of Florian and Julius Brandt. But it does look to me as though the race officials could well redress that balance. But working their way through the Morgans on the final lap. It's quite nice to see the Morgans out on circuit together for a change. As, goodness me, the 161 Morgan, Simon Orobigan and James Bellinger driving that car. It looks like their number's about to fall off. If that's the worst thing that you can say that can happen to a Morgan in a race, then fair play to you. But working their way through on the very final lap of this race then, because we are going to run out of time as the cars come through to finish the lap. I don't think we're going to start another lap. So the GT and SPORTSCAR Cup pre-1966 race of 2 hours, 32 cars started. By my mathematics, we've still got 26 of them going around the course. And what a battle it's been for the two Portuguese drivers at the sharp end of the field. Don't throw it away on the last lap, for goodness sake. As these two, Pedro Macedo Silva and Jose Monroy, have absolutely classed it in the second half of this race. The time will run down to 0 as they're going through the final sector, and the checkered flag should be the next thing that they will see. What an exciting opportunity it's going to be for them to celebrate on the top step of the podium. The time has indeed run down to 0. The checkered flag should be the next thing that they see as they come up over the top of the crest. The AC Cobra 289 Sports of the Portuguese talents Pedro Macedo Silva and Jose Monroy power slide their way out of the final turn. The checkered flag is in the air, and it's a Portuguese victory at the Autódromo Internacional Algarve. Jose Monroy and Pedro Macedo Silva come through for the victory. Excellent racing from the AC Cobra pair. Brilliant, brilliant racing. They commanded it all the way through from the second half of the race, and they were not going to lose ground once they got into position. We're going to look back and see some class winners. It's going to be a victory in the SP1 category for Rudy Friedrichs and Charlie Martin in their 1953 Jaguar C-Type. We're waiting to see the class winners in GT3. That's going to be Matt Walton and Nigel Greensall in their Jaguar E-Type. There is the third of the AC Cobras coming through to take the finish line. Oh, sorry, the second of them, I should say. That's Chris Charles Jr. crossing the line to come home in second place with his father, Chris Charles Sr., also at the wheel during the race itself. And it's going to be a victory in the GT2 category, provisionally at least, for Florian and Julius Brandt, ahead of George Grant and Nick Rutter for Rob Boston Racing in their MGB. And then Nick Lafferty and Ian Bankhurst will be third in their MGB. In the TC1 category, it'll be Rick Turner who gets the victory with Bruce Galliford. The two of them will be the victors. And then in the second place, it'll be Richard and Alice Locke in their Mini Broadspeed. And then it will be Richard Parsons and Alistair Pugh in their Mini in third position. What a fantastic race it's been. Great racing all the way. And a truly magnificent drive from the AC Cobra 289 of Pedro Macedo Silva and Jose Monroy. They really have been exceptional today. They were not crazy in the first hour. They just drove within their own limits. They knew what the car could do. They made the overtaking moves when they had to. They took their time when it was necessary. Once they got into the lead, they made sure, look, we know this place like the back of our hand. We are going to make sure no one's going to get close to us. They did that. And with all the British crews that are here, it's the only Portuguese team. They started 9th. And they have come through for the victory after 2 hours of furious racing here in the Algarve Classic. Excellent racing at the Algarve Classic Festival 2024 here on the Autódromo Internacional Algarve in the GT and SPORTSCAR Cup pre-66 race. And that is a fantastic end to the season for the championship as well. Great races at Enna in Sicily, at Silverstone in Northamptonshire in Great Britain, at Castlecombe in Wiltshire, and here at the Autódromo Algarve in Portimao in Portugal. And it's an all-Portuguese success story, as the two drivers will be able to celebrate in pit lane in fantastic fashion. Straight out of the AC Cobra. And that is how you do that. Great result. Jose Monroy and Pedro Macedo Silva are victorious here at Portimao. What a brilliant result. What a great achievement. And a fantastic drive all the way through this corking good race. Every single class gave us plenty of entertainment and excitement. Great result. Great job. The word flawless is overused in motorsport. I think you can't really describe Pedro Macedo Silva and Jose Monroy's victory any other way. It was pretty flawless. Never put a wheel wrong. So victory in the SP1 category behind them, going to the Jaguar C-Type of Rudy Fredericks and Charlie Martin in their Jaguar C-Type. The GT3 victory provisionally to Matt Walton and Nigel Greensall in their Jaguar E-Type. Julius and Florian Brandt are provisionally the winners in GT2 ahead of George Grant and Nick Rutter in the MGB run by Rob Boston Racing, although of course if their penalty is overturned, then they should be back into the leading position again. TC1 victory going the way of Rick Turner and Bruce Galliford in their Austin Mini Cooper S. And that is about all she wrote across the 5 categories. There is your provisional result in the GT and Sports Car Cup pre-1966 race here at the Autódromo Internacional Algarve. Great racing right from the start. We had a very different finishing order to the qualifying yesterday in the drizzly conditions. And it really has been a sensational battle. Lots of overtakes right from the word go. Our pole sitter, Reyes Sauter, losing ground initially. And there were plenty of great duels in the early stages between the AC Cobras and Jason Minshaw in the Jaguar E-Type low drag. Sadly, he wasn't able to get to the end of the race, having to do this entire race on his own as his co-driver Martin Melling fell ill this morning. And then there were problems that developed in that Jaguar E-Type that kept him out of the race regardless. So you can see here in the early stages, they were running as low as 4th place, the Portuguese pair, but they took their opportunities when they needed to. Move by move, they worked their way forward. They did not rush any of their overtakes. They just read the situation as neatly and tidily as they possibly could. Got themselves up the order, worked their way into a good prominent position. And when it counted, they were able to make good use of the situation. Rather sad for Christian Oldendorf. He wasn't able to get the Alfa Romeo Giulia TZ2 to a race-winning position despite leading in the early stages. But we have had 5 fantastic class winners in what has proved to be another fantastic performance. In TC1, it is Rick Turner and Bruce Galliford in their Austin Mini Cooper S. It is Florian and Julian Brandt, the German pair, in their TVR Grand Tourer Mark III, provisionally, of course, for all of these classes, not just for one. Matt Walton and Nigel Greensall coming through in their Jaguar E-Type in the GT3 category to take the victory. Rudy Fredericks and Charlie Martin in their 1953 Jaguar C-Type. There it is, having taken the victory in the SP1 category. And then the overall victors in the red AC Cobra 289 Sports Package, Pedro Macedo Silva and Jose Monroy. What an amazing race. 2 hours of no holds barred, absolutely flamboyant driving, resulting in a very deserving victory. And on home soil too. Great end to the season, and of course the only thing to finish off was the GT and Sports Car Cup dinner. For those who are obviously interested, that'll be at the Royal Automobile Club at Pall Mall in London on December the 7th. From myself, Jake Sanson, from everybody watching, thank you very much indeed for being with us here at the Autódromo Internacional Algarve. There will be more in the future. Thank you for watching. See you again. 1966 race, because there are 5 different classes. We don't have time to stay for all 5 podiums, because that would take quite a while, but the SP1 podium, of course, is the Jaguar C-Type of Rudy Fredericks and Charlie Martin, ahead of the Lotus Mark X of Max Smith-Hilliard and Miles Griffiths, and then Dean Baker and Gregor Fiskin in the HWM Jaguar. Although they didn't finish the race, I think they will still be provisionally classified as 3rd in the category. The TC1 podium will be Rick Turner and Bruce Galliford in the Austin Mini Cooper S as the victors, ahead of Richard and Alice Locke in their Mini Broadspeed GTS from 1966 in 2nd, and then 3rd will be Richard Parsons and Alistair Pugh in 3rd in their Austin Mini Cooper S. In the GT2 category podiums, well, it's going to be the victory provisionally for Florian Brandt and Julius Brandt in their TVR Grand Tourer Mark III, the MGB from Rob Boston Racing and Clapham North MOT of George Grant and Nick Rutter in 2nd position. After narrowly missing out on a podium last year, they finally get the job done on this occasion, and very deservedly so. Hugh Lafferty and Ian Bankhurst come through in their number 57 GT2 MGB to be 3rd on that podium. The GT3 podium will be made up of Matt Walton and Nigel Greensall in their Jaguar E-Type from 1962 as the race winners. And then obviously the battle behind them very close indeed. And obviously the battles continuing across the alternate categories. We should be hopefully able to stick around at the very least for the podium ceremony in the overall category between the 3 classes. We're just waiting for official confirmation on that, but we should well be receiving that very shortly indeed. Certainly a very exciting end to what has been a very impressive Algarve Classic Festival GT and Sports Car Cup Pre-66 race. Had some really exciting racing all the way through these competitions, and drivers have definitely given us plenty to get excited about. There are more races on the calendar, of course, here at the Algarve Classic Festival. You'll have to revert to the other live streams in order to keep up to date with those. But certainly it's the GT and Sports Car Cup Pre-66 2-hour race that has been the source of our focus. There's certainly more information. If you want to get more interested, more detail and more information on this particular category, you can do so on the Instagram page, GT and Sports Car Cup. And of course, you can also follow along automobiles.historiques on Instagram. Plenty of great information and more fantastic competitions there. There are also the curators of the Concours of Elegance, the Concours d'Elegance, which takes place at Hampton Court Palace every year. That's worth a follow on Instagram as well. Concours_of_elegance. Plenty of great retro motorsport for you all to be enthused. So it's official confirmation for the podium ceremony before we sign ourselves off, but it's certainly been a fantastic end to what has already been a very exciting race battle. Great to see so many great members of the sports car community here, not just to completely and regularly race in GT and Sports Car Cup, but obviously we've had a lot of people here from the Monaco Historique, from the Goodwood members meeting and the Goodwood Revival as well. It's an invitation-only race series, of course, the GT and Sports Car Cup, but you can make inquiries if you wish to compete for genuine Pre-66 GTs and Pre-63 sports cars that would have been raced in period during the World Endurance Championship of the 60s. And obviously celebrating the great drivers and cars of the Grand Touring era of FIA GT Cup racing in the 1960s. All those fantastic races at the Targa Florio in Sicily, the Daytona 2,000 kilometers before it was the 24-hour race, of course, the 12 hours of Sebring, and at Spa-Francorchamps, at the Nürburgring, at Reims, at Mugello, and at the Tourist Trophy. Watching again the highlights from a fantastic race battle here. And it really has been all about the AC Cobras in fantastic fashion here at Portimao. We've seen some great racing all the way through, and great to see everybody really enjoying and enthusiastic about how the racing has been. Some wonderful highlights from 2 great hours of motor racing that have really taught us just how amazing these race cars can be, and demonstrating to us just how exciting the sport can still be in motor racing at this level. No traction control, no yaw control, no anti-lock brakes, no electronic systems, just a decent engine, some pedals, a bucket seat, a paint job, and an absolutely fantastic race circuit. Boy, have we had fun these last 2 hours. It's been wonderful. We've really been treated to some proper great motor racing action on this circuit. Thank goodness we got better weather than we did last year. So let's see how it all concludes in the latter stages. Obviously, there's going to be some conversations, as there always are after the race. Obviously, there'll be a few drivers and teams that will want clarification on a few things, so there could be an investigation or two after the race. But we're here for the fun, we're here for the excitement, we're here to celebrate the passion and the petrol hedonism of this sport. That's what vintage motor racing is all about, these magnificent machines giving us great excitement and drama from the word go to the checkered flag. I'm delighted to say as well, through the 2 hour race, we only actually had one full course yellow period at any point. The safety car was not needed at any point through the 2 hour race. That's amazing. 26 of the 32 cars actually made it to the finish line. And we had some great battles all the way through to entertain us during that point. Wonderful that we had so many great races and so many great battles. Some proper good tactics from drivers through the course of the race. Obviously, in endurance racing, they always say you're only ever as fast as your weakest driver. But it's been cool to see that everybody's put on a great show, and we've had some magnificent battles here on the Autódromo Algarve. If you are interested in getting a little bit more information on this fantastic championship or in this fantastic community of racing, the website is gtandsportscarcup.com. There's a fantastic calendar. You can sign up to the newsletter. You can get in touch with Flavien and Vanessa Marseille, who have obviously been organising this category for several years now, ever since 2007, approaching 20 years of motorsport. And a race like this really does demonstrate why it's required, why it's needed, and why it's loved. But great racing from our two Portuguese stars, Pedro Macedo Silva and Jose Monroy, in their AC Cobra 289. They are our victors in fantastic fashion. So as the Algarve Classic Festival continues here this weekend, it's a wonderful end to the season in Iberian motorsport. It's been a weekend that's had all sorts of fantastic displays over the years, as well as obviously having great racing. It's a weekend that gives us opportunity to have the Iberian supercars out there. The bikes come racing, so do the historic Grand Prix cars, the single-seaters from yesteryear, and the historic endurance obviously takes place later this afternoon as well. But it's been great to see everybody really enjoy the festivities and the flavour of historic motor racing and some of the modern representations of racing as well. The whole festival is a celebration of why we are obsessed with motorsport at this level. It's a great discipline, it's a great championship, we love it, and it's always really exciting to see how all of these guys get to demonstrate their love and their joy, wheel to wheel and at full throttle. Well, there we are, ladies and gentlemen, the podium ceremony for our overall race in the GT and Sports Car Cup. PRE-1966, our three crews on the podium. Third position for Brian Cordwell and Kieran Clark. Second place for Chris Charles Jr. and Chris Charles Sr. And on the top step of the podium, Pedro Macedo Silva and Jose Monroy for Portugal. And of course, all three crews aboard very similar AC Cobra 289s. The national anthem for Portugal. I guess one of our winning drivers has ended up having to leave the circuit early because obviously they don't just race, they also conduct business. So there is the crew in third position. Great performance then from Brian Cordwell and Kieran Clark. Great to see Kieran Clark instrumental in two great races this weekend, not just one. He was driving in two completely different cars over the course of it. Father and son share the podium in second place. Chris Sr. along with Chris Jr. The Charles boys have done a fantastic job to bring their car to second position. But the race winner on the top step of the podium, it's the pair of Portuguese stars, Pedro Macedo Silva and Jose Monroy. I'm sure the second trophy will go the way of the second driver at some point. So we're obviously two drivers celebrating at the end of the event there earlier on. But it's a great podium to end a fantastic race battle in the GT and Sports Car Cup PRE-1966 race, the fourth and last event of the year. From Enna-Pergusa in Sicily to Silverstone in Northamptonshire to Castle Combe in Wiltshire in the United Kingdom, through to here at the Autódromo Internacional Algarve in Portugal. What a fantastic season it's been in the GT and Sports Car Cup. Great results in the GT4 category and of course overall. Great to see everybody putting in such a fantastic effort and a great display after 2 hours of proper, no-holds-barred motorsport. Great stuff. There was great racing in the early stages, wasn't there? We had all three AC Cobras dueling away with Jason Minshaw in the Jaguar E-Type low drag. Sadly, Martin Melling wasn't able to take up the race start due to falling unwell at the 11th hour. But we did have some cracking good racing from the drivers up at the sharp end. All of the battles came in the early stages. And it was wonderful to see all these cars really take on a proper go at the victory. So many great class battles as well. All 32 cars came to play and put on an excellent show. We're really happy and really proud to have brought it to you. And we can't wait to do it again in the future. We're hoping that there's going to be a lot more from these particular race battles in the future, and you'll get to see more of them. But you can follow along with the antics of the GT and Sports Car Cup on the Instagram, Facebook, and of course, website pages. And there'll be plenty more opportunities for you to soak up the excitement and the atmosphere of these competitions more and more in the future. A massive thank you to everybody for watching along. It's been really great racing all the way through the 2 hours of the GT and Sports Car Cup PRE-1966 here at the Algarve Classic Festival.